My parents raised a golden child who wrecked his life, yet they wanted me to fund his failed business. As I refused, they sued me for unjust enrichment. When I turned 18, I made a secret pledge to myself. I would never expect anyone to save me. Nor my parents, nor my instructors. Not some great opportunity that could come my way. It's just me. That pledge affected every decision I made thereafter. Even if no one around me noticed or cared at the time, particularly my parents. If you asked them back then, I was the silent one. The boy who was constantly immersed in his laptop. The person who did not comprehend how the world operates. Meanwhile, my older brother Victor strode around as if he were born with a crown. His birthdays seemed like coronations. Every supper was a demonstration of his alleged genius. My folks clapped the loudest. My name is Dylan. I'm 26 now. But my narrative begins a few years ago when I was just turning 23. By then, I had paid off my school loans. Yes, each of them. I had purchased my first home with cash. Nothing fancy, just a simple house in the suburbs, and I had built my e-commerce firm into something I was proud of. 6 figures in income, a few freelancers under me, and the type of independence that most people my age could only dream of. I was not showy. I did not make a post about it. I simply kept my head down and worked because I knew if I stopped to rejoice, someone would attempt to take it away from me. Turns that I was correct. Growing up in a tiny town, everyone knew each other's business, especially if you had a last name like ours. My father, John, was the regional manager for a building supply firm. He carried his title as a badge of honor. My mother, Rachel, alternated between part-time work and being a full-time supporter of Victor's goals. Victor, who is 3 years older than me, has always been the golden kid. My parents used to joke that Victor was born with a winning grin and a scholarship offer. It didn't matter that he had failed school, wrecked 2 automobiles, and had maxed out my father's credit card on an unscheduled spring break vacation. My parents always found a way to shrug it off. He's just finding himself, they'd remark. He's meant for great things. As for me, I was the backup plan, the unseen sister. I recall one Thanksgiving dinner, not long before all hell broke out. We were seated at my parents' place, the turkey half carved, and my mother had already had a glass and a half of her boxed wine. Victor had just returned from trying out a company concept in Los Angeles, which ended predictably with him collapsing on someone's sofa and pleading to return home. My folks welcomed him home like a war hero. At supper, my father raised a glass. To new beginnings, he murmured, gazing right at Victor. We know your next chapter is going to be a big one. Victor grinned and clinked his glasses. I said nothing. Nobody toasted me when I bought my house. Nobody even mentioned it. They all knew. I notified them months before, provided images, and offered to host them. I never received an answer. But Victor returns with 2 duffel bags and debt collectors on his pursuit. And then he's the phoenix, rising from the ashes. I tried not to let it affect me. I actually did. I'd spent years growing my firm, mastering SEO, product sourcing, and customer service. Every late night, every missed party, every small victory, I silently celebrated alone in my apartment. I hoped that would finally be enough to win some respect. But I should have known better. In our house, effort was not important. The outcome didn't matter. What mattered was image, charisma, and drama, and Victor possessed all of these in plenty. A week after Thanksgiving, my mother contacted me. Her tone was unusual, stiff and prepared. She asked if I could come over and speak. I figured it had to do with Victor. Perhaps they wanted me to assist him get work or act as a reference. I was accustomed to being the silent fixer, the ghost behind the curtain. But when I arrived, I sensed something wasn't right. My father sat in his recliner, arms folded, television muted. Victor sat on the couch in sweatpants, looking smug as if he was in on an inside joke. My mother usually smiled nervously before saying something that she knew would anger me. She motioned toward the kitchen table. Why don't we sit down? I recall how slowly I moved. The air seemed thick, as if something was going to move. I sat. My mother took a breath. Then she said it. We were hoping you could assist Victor with a small investment. That word lingered in the air like a terrible odor. Investment. As if I were an angel investor they might persuade to save their dying ship. I blinked. What kind of investment? Victor said, leaning closer. I've got this idea. It's like a subscription box service but for tech gadgets. You know, like those mystery boxes. We could market it to college kids. Low overhead, high margins. I was staring at him and my parents. "And you want me to fund it?" my father said, clearing his mouth. "Not quite funded, just help him get started. You've had a wonderful run, Dylan. You've done well for yourself. It's time to pay it forward." Pay it forward. I felt like I'd been given something for free. Like at 2 a.m. Customer emails, 12-hour workdays, and ramen-fueled academic grind all meant nothing since I hadn't done it correctly. "I'm sorry," I responded softly, attempting to keep my voice controlled. Victor wrinkled his eyes. "But I'm not in a position to just throw money at a vague idea with no business plan. It's not vague. I've got contacts. I know people." "You've been back here for 2 weeks," I replied, "living in the guest room." "That was a mistake." I noticed my mother's face stiffen. The way my father leaned forward. My mother laid her hand on the table. "Dylan, we're just asking you to help your brother. Family supports each other." "I've supported myself since I was 18, I said, raising my voice. "That's how I was taught, right?" They didn't respond, so I left. I assumed that would be the end of it. I expected them to guilt trip me. Maybe send a few passive-aggressive texts before moving on. That's how things had always gone. But I had no idea how dire things were going to get. I didn't realize how far my parents would go to defend their golden boy. Because the next time I saw them was in court. But that's a step forward. There is more to tell. There's so much more. The quiet conflict began with a favor and escalated into a full-fledged legal ambush. The treachery and falsehoods. When I realized my own parents were prepared to ruin me merely to support the son who had never raised a finger, I resolved to quit turning the other cheek. They did not knock. It was a Wednesday night, and I remember it vividly because it was inventory night, the least glamorous but most important aspect of my firm. Every week I'd move boxes from the storage room, scan and repack merchandise, and prepare orders for my fulfillment partners. That night, I was ankle-deep in mailing labels when I heard my front door open. At first, I felt I was dreaming things. I lived alone. Nobody had a spare key. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of the lock sliding shut again, along with a faint murmur of voices. 3, perhaps 4. And one of them was Victor. I rounded the corner quickly, my heart hammering. What the? My folks were standing in my foyer. Victor stood behind them, smiling as if he owned the area. My father carried a manila folder under his arm. And that self-righteous look Dad used to give me when he lectured me about attitude as a youngster. My mother offered me a tight-lipped smile as if this were a simple family visit rather than a break-in. "How did you get in?" I inquired, shocked. My mom responded, "We used the key," as if it were nothing. Like the emergency spare I gave them years before, when I still felt we had something approximating a healthy relationship. It was an open invitation to stroll in unexpectedly. I stuck out my hand. "Give it back now." She paused, then dug it out of her handbag and dropped it into my palm, like a child caught stealing. But it wasn't only that. It was the expression in her eyes. She was not ashamed. She seemed disappointed in me. "What are you doing here?" I said, fatigued rather than furious. Victor shrugged and walked into the living room as if he owned it. We tried being polite. "You slammed the door in our faces, so now we're handling things the proper way." "The proper way?" I repeated, my brows narrowing. My father set the packet on my kitchen island and moved it over. "It's time we had a serious talk, Dylan, about what you owe this family." I did not open the folder. Not yet. I was too preoccupied trying to find out if I was dreaming. "You're in my house without permission. You have 4 seconds to explain why I shouldn't call the cops." "Oh please," my mom responded, like if I were acting theatrical. "You're acting like a stranger." "I wonder why," I said. "Just read the paperwork," my father replied, indicating toward the packet. I turned it open. It didn't register right away. Legal language, names, and numbers. A suit was lodged in their names against me. Then, fraudulent withholding of assets, misappropriation of family investment, unjust enrichment at the expense of sibling. I was staring at the words. What the hell is this? My voice broke sharply and loudly in the quiet of my home. Victor stepped forward, arms crossed. "It's what you get when you lie about where the money came from." "I didn't lie about anything." "Oh, come on," he remarked, rolling his eyes. "We all know you didn't build this business from scratch. You used the money Grandma left, didn't you?" My jaw fell. "Are you serious right now?" He smiled like a cat that had just trapped a mouse. "You think I didn't notice how you suddenly got real cozy with e-commerce the year Grandma died? That's when your little side hustle blew up. Admit it." I didn't get a cent from Grandma's estate, I remarked, surprised. She left everything to Nana. She made that clear. Yeah, and she always had a soft spot for you, my mother explained gently. Even when Victor was the one who needed help. So, let me get this straight, I began carefully. You break into my house, throw false accusations at me, and what? You want me to admit to stealing money I never touched? We want what's fair, my father stated forcefully. Victor has been struggling. You've clearly been profiting. It's time to rebalance the scales. There was a sign. The mask was off. I anticipated deception, even guilt trips, but this, a lawsuit against their own son, shattered something inside of me. Years of being disregarded, spoken down to, and treated as a supporting role in Victor's tale. Everything boiled over at once. You want to rebalance the scales? I said, my voice trembling. Allouds talk about scales. Let's talk about the 2 automobiles you bought him before he was even 20. How you co-signed his loans, paid off his credit cards, and allowed him move back. Every time he failed, you gave him everything. And me? I've never asked you for a penny since you were always so proud. My mother snapped. Because I had to be. I yelled. You never offered. You've never believed in me. You never inquired about what I was constructing. And now that it's succeeded, do you think I owe you? After a brief period of stillness, Victor mumbled. You wouldn't even have a future if it weren't for this family. My fists tightened. You mean, the family that is suing me? My father took a step forward. You can prevent all of this. If you just assist your brother in getting back on his feet, we can dismiss the claim. A clean slate. You mean hand up my money so you don't ruin my reputation? He did not respond. I grabbed the folder and flung it back. Get out now. My mother looked like she wanted to quarrel, and my father looked like he wanted to punch a wall. Victor didn't say anything, just turned and went away with that arrogant swagger that showed he felt he'd won, but they hadn't. They'd ignited the fire. The fallout gradually began to arrive over the next few days. A letter from their lawyer arrived first, confirming they were proceeding with the claim. Then came calls from extended family, uncles, cousins, and even old neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting to check in after hearing some things. The rumor mill was spinning fast, and everything painted me as the villain. I tried to stay focused, but I couldn't ignore how poisoned everything felt. Every email notification felt like a subpoena, and every family text felt like a trap. I stopped sleeping, and I started checking my front door twice a night. Then, 2 weeks after the break-in, I received the email that confirmed it all. It was from my bank. One of my business accounts had been frozen pending an investigation related to a legal dispute. My heart stopped, and I clicked through, my fingers trembling. I'd done nothing wrong. I'd paid all of my taxes and kept clean records. But now I was being treated like a criminal because of their baseless claims. I called the bank. They were polite but firm. The freeze would remain in place until the claim was resolved in court. Victor had promised to make things fair. He was dragging me into the mud, and my parents were handing him the rope. I thought that would be the worst of it. But then I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Victor had not just filed a lawsuit. He'd filed a restraining order against me, claiming I'd threatened him, claiming I was erratic, hostile, and a danger to his safety. I stared at the copy in disbelief. The timing wasn't a coincidence. He was attempting to portray me as unstable so that the court would believe his story rather than mine. It was character assassination, plain and simple. A smear campaign based on lies and funded by the same people who used to tuck me in at night was the tipping point. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about the lawsuit. It was about principle, about standing up to people who had used love as a leash and expected me to roll over and thank them for it. I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to apologize, and I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story of my life. They wanted a war, so I'd give them one, and the first shot would be fired at the one secret they thought I didn't know, the financial skeleton in their closet. The restraining order hearing was set for a Monday morning in early spring. The sun was out, but I barely noticed because I hadn't slept the night before. I was too wired, too angry, and too focused on every worst-case scenario running through my head. My lawyer, a guy named Jason, who I found through a friend of a friend, assured me the case was weak. "This isn't going anywhere," he'd said. "Judges can smell fabricated drama a mile away." Still, I was shaking as I walked into the courthouse. I wasn't afraid of losing the restraining order case. I was afraid of what it meant that Victor was willing to go this far, that my parents were willing to swear under oath that I was violent, unstable, and a danger to my own brother, and that they were coaching him on what to say. My parents sat behind Victor, acting as if he were the victim of a mafia vendetta, and their fingerprints were all over the document, despite the fact that their names were not on it. Mom was wiping away her fake tears. When the judge threw out the case 20 minutes in, citing insufficient evidence and a clear motive of financial retaliation, they were stunned. Victor even tried to speak again after the gavel dropped, as if he thought he could persuade the judge to change his mind, but that part was over. I wasn't relieved. I went home that day, sat on my living room floor, and stared at the unopened boxes of unsent inventory stacked against the wall. Even though I'd technically won, I knew this wasn't over. The restraining order was merely a distraction, a character hit piece designed to soften me up before the lawsuit began. For the first time in years I didn't want to work, I didn't want to fight, I just sat there in silence, feeling as if I'd lost something I couldn't name. Over the next month, everything stalled. My business accounts remained partially frozen. I moved some operations to a backup account, but the damage had already been done. My cash flow suffered. My ad budget dried up, my fulfillment timeline slowed, and some customers backed out. One of my best-selling suppliers dropped me, citing reputational risk. I tried to explain and fight through it, but the more I pushed, the more I felt like I was drowning in mud that someone else had poured on me. I was losing my footing, not only financially, but also mentally. Then came the worst blow. On a Thursday afternoon, my landlord for the warehouse space I rented, which was only 800 square feet but had become the beating heart of my operation, informed me that he was not renewing my lease due to too much legal noise. I have other tenants. I can't afford drama. I begged. I offered to pay 3 months in advance. He didn't budge. I hung up and stared at the wall. That was the moment. Rock bottom. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet, cold. As if something inside me finally broke free and drifted away. I'd spent 3 years building something that worked, something honest, something mine. And in less than 2 months the people who raised me had almost destroyed it. I could have folded. I even started drafting a letter to the court agreeing to settle something low, just enough to make them go away. But I didn't send it because that night I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Her name was Sophie, and she used to be my neighbor when we were kids. We used to play backyard tag and ride bikes through the cul-de-sac, but we lost touch after she moved away in middle school. I hadn't thought of her in years, but there she was, messaging me on LinkedIn. "Hey Dylan," she wrote. "I noticed your name in a mutual post and did a double take. I remember you from back home. I'm sad to hear about the litigation. I just wanted to say, don't let them take everything you've achieved. You were always the clever and quiet one. But we all knew." I read that post several times, not because it changed anything, but because it reminded me of who I used to be. I got up that night, knowing that they couldn't take away the part of me that knew how to build. I was the kid who used to sell homemade candles door to door and stayed up late watching coding videos on YouTube. I went into the storage room, cleared off my whiteboard and started again from scratch. Rebuild, rebrand, restart. I started small, with only a few hundred in liquid cash, barely enough for a single Facebook ad run, so I went organic. Reddit, Instagram Reels, TikTok snippets. I rebranded my best-selling product under a different name, with a cleaner aesthetic and a more personal voice. I built a new Shopify store using a VPN and a Fresh Business LLC in another state. I stayed up until 2 a.m. every night, made calls, wrote copy, and learned more about web optimization in 2 weeks than I had in the previous year, and it began to work slowly, quietly, but it worked. My DMs were filled with customers asking where the old brand went and thanking me when I responded personally. One of them was a YouTuber who ended up featuring the product in a review. That review blew up, and orders tripled in a week. Meanwhile, the lawsuit stalled. My lawyer filed a motion to dismiss, and their team attempted to amend it. The judge pushed hearings back another month, and then another, giving me time to recover and prepare. Because while they were busy spinning fairy tales about how I'd stolen Victor's future, I was busy collecting receipts, not just business receipts, but family receipts, tax records, which weren't easy to get. But they were real. My Nana, before she passed away, had sent me a manila envelope of her own back when she still lived alone. Victor had gotten a large payout, enough to pay off his college loans, start a business, or buy a house. But he blew it. Gambling, bars, trips, crypto scams, all gone within a year, and he knew it. My parents also knew it. But they never expected me to find out. I also discovered an old voicemail from Nana, who left it a few weeks before her death. Her voice was feeble but clear. "I hope you're doing well, Dylan. I simply wanted to express that I am proud of you. I wish others saw what I see. Keep going. And don't let them shame you into helping those who have never attempted to rescue themselves. The tides were turning, but I didn't tell anyone. I stayed quiet. I kept building. I moved my entire operation into a friend's garage temporarily. He ran a coffee roasting business and let me use his back room for shipping. I played that message on repeat the night I had it transcribed for evidence. I became invisible for a while. I let them think I was losing, and I let them tell stories about how the truth was catching up with me. All the while I was watching, waiting, and preparing for the next phase, because the court date would come soon, and I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd dismantle everything they'd built, not out of vengeance, but because some people only learn when you stop letting them write your story and hand them a copy of the real one. And believe me, I was writing every word. They had no idea I had the file, which made it so satisfying. The documents from Nana's estate, the ones I discovered tucked inside that envelope she mailed before she died, weren't just sentimental relics. They were a blueprint, a timeline, and a receipt, the kind of things my parents assumed would never see the light of day. After all, Victor had torched through that money before the ink on the check had dried. Who would remember? Who would care? Well, me. I scanned everything. Highlighted key figures. The trust fund. The disbursement details. The fact that Victor had been given an $80,000 payout at age 22 under the condition that it be used for long-term growth and development, but my name was nowhere to be found. I hadn't received a penny. The nicest part was Nana's handwritten message on the back of the final page, only 6 words in her cursive scroll. Dylan doesn't need it. He builds. 6 words that shattered my parents' whole narrative. 6 words that exposed Victor's sob tale for what it was. An inheritance wasted rather than stolen, a future he set on fire. But I didn't go public with it yet. The case was still plodding along, and my parents' lawyer continued trying to put hearings back, which was okay with me. Every week that went gave me time to grow stronger and them more rope to hang themselves with. While they delayed, I began digging. I reached out to an old neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who used to live across from us growing up, and she remembered everything, including the day Victor received the check and the brand new car that appeared in our driveway a week later. People talk, especially when you're polite and quiet. Mrs. Thompson told me over tea, "Your Nana," about the parties and screaming scenes between him and my father when the money ran out. She always thought he'd spend it. She was not blind. You know, she simply didn't want to harm your mother. I didn't even have to request a statement, she provided one. Word spread, and I soon had a little file full of messages, texts, and even images. Victor in Vegas, champagne in hand. Victor on a boat, tagged in an old college friend's Instagram post, clutching a bottle of Grey Goose and flipping at the camera. All within 10 months of Nana's trust being paid out, painted a picture that was loud, brash, and irrefutable. But that wasn't the only angle I was working. I had one more card to play, one that required some finesse. The first person I called was Mr. Collins, who used to be our family accountant back when my parents still filed their taxes correctly. I hadn't seen him in years, but he remembered me right away. "Dylan, you were the quiet one, right? The polite one." "I need a favor," I said. I wasn't sure he'd comply, but when I told him about the lawsuit, the restraining order and the charges, he grew quiet. Real quiet. "They told me you stole from them," he said after a beat. "They said you were hiding something big, but I didn't believe it." "Why not?" "Because I did their taxes the year they got that trust distribution. Rachel told me it was for Victor's future, seed money for a tech business, and I recorded it as a gift transfer, precisely as she requested. Are you prepared to put that in writing?" I inquired, followed by a silence. "I'll do better," he answered. "I've still got the files." He emailed them the next morning, so I had proof from 3 ways. Nana's trust paperwork, eyewitness evidence, and tax records prove Victor got money he did not disclose during discovery. My lawyer nearly fell out of his chair when I handed him the file. "They're cooked," Jason remarked, flicking over the pages. "And this is no longer merely a defense. This is counterclaim material." I nodded. "That's the plan. But I didn't just want to win, I wanted to change the narrative. So I started laying out something else, something more public. I rebuilt my brand under a new name, with a different domain, visuals and everything. But this time, I focused on the story, not the lawsuit itself, just the broad strokes. Built from scratch, I said in the About page, bootstrapped, no handouts. Every dollar earned the hard way. I never named names. I didn't have to. People knew. Old customers returned. New ones followed. Word spread. Someone began a Reddit post about the rebrand and it took fire. This is how you bounce back. One remark said, "This guy's work ethic is incredible. My email list has quadrupled. Revenue recovered. I remained silent because I was still waiting for one more item to come into place, Victor's next move. It arrived sooner than expected. Jason called me one morning when I was packaging orders. They filed an emergency motion. For what? Freeze your personal assets. They say you're hiding money. I should have been enraged and panicked, but instead I grinned and said, let them try. While they were playing checkers, intoxicated on wrath and entitlement, I was putting up the chessboard. Everything I had was now secured by a new LLC. Jason chuckled when he saw the paperwork. The property was transferred to a trust, the automobile was leased via the firm, and my savings were split between two accounts under different holding companies. You've been busy. They taught me well, I told them. Never trust anyone, not even family. We opposed the motion with everything. The tax records, the trust documents, the timeline, Mrs. Thompson's letter, Mr. Collins's statement, a full audit trail of my business's growth from the day I started selling phone accessories out of my dorm room to the day I bought my house. It was surgical and devastating. But I wasn't done. Here's the thing about people like Victor and my parents. They don't just want money. They want control. The ability to shape the story, and to say, you owe us. And have everyone believe it. So, I planned one final move. Something public. Something permanent. I scheduled a small podcast interview with a fellow entrepreneur I'd met years ago. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral, but it was honest. For an hour, I told my story. Not the lawsuit, not the revenge, but the real story. About growing up in the shadow of someone who could do no wrong. About building a business at night while the rest of my family laughed at me. About paying off student loans with side hustle money, and about the power of being underestimated. Sometimes, I explained, the toughest part isn't beginning from scratch. It starts from behind, when the people who should have helped you are the ones who hold you back. The show aired a week later, and the response was overwhelming. DMs, emails, and comments from strangers who said they recognized themselves in my remarks. People who had been cut down by their own families, who had had to battle for every inch, but more than that, people began asking questions about the litigation, which my parents were not prepared to answer. Their lawyer contacted Jason in a panic. We'd like to revisit settlement discussions, he told me. We're not interested, Jason said. Because it was too late. I wasn't playing defense anymore, I was setting the terms. The next hearing was fast approaching, and I was prepared. Not just with evidence. Not just with allies. But with the unshakable truth that no matter how many times they tried to rewrite my story, I still held the pen, and soon, I'd use it to end theirs. The courtroom was colder than I remembered, not physically, but in that sterile, stiff kind of cold that you get in your spine when you know something irreversible is about to happen. The walls were beige, the lighting was fluorescent, and there was no dramatic music, just the hum of tension as everyone took their seats. It had been 8 months since they first filed the lawsuit, 8 months since my parents and my golden child brother Victor decided I owed them the life he had squandered, 8 months of venomous texts, weaponized family gossip, and pathetic attempts to destroy everything I'd built on my own since I was 18 years old, and now it was time. Victor sat next to their attorney in a wrinkled suit he didn't know how to wear, chewing the inside of his cheek like he was trying to disappear into his seat. My parents were behind him, both dressed like they were attending a church fundraiser. Mom in pearls and pastel, Dad stiff in a blazer that didn't quite fit around his stomach anymore, and they refused to look at me. My lawyer, Jason, shuffled papers beside me. I was nervous, but it was a strange quiet calm, the kind you only get when you've spent months preparing for a moment with such surgical precision. There was nothing left to panic about. Everything had already been set in motion. He leaned over and whispered, "This is going to be fun." The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s, called everyone to order. The hearing began with their lawyer laying out the same tired argument that I had unfairly benefited from family resources, that I'd misled my parents into believing I was self-made, and that Victor's life had been derailed because I hoarded financial assets that should have been shared. The remarks sounded desperate and empty, and suddenly it was our turn. Jason stepped up, no theatrics, no yelling, just facts. "Your Honor," he started, "we will demonstrate 3 things. First, my client, Dylan, did not get any financial support or inheritance from his family. Second, the plaintiff's son, Victor, acquired $80,000 from a family trust and spent it foolishly. And third, that this lawsuit is a malicious attempt to extract funds from my client under false pretenses after the plaintiffs failed to control their own finances or their son." He then threw the file away. Exhibit A. Nana's trust paperwork, plainly state that the money was for Victor, and only Victor. My name wasn't mentioned. Exhibit B, the notarized letter from Mr. Collins, their former accountant, confirming he filed that gift as a trust distribution with explicit instructions from my mother. Exhibit C shows a timeline of Victor's social media posts, travel logs, and online purchases. Everything from designer footwear to bottle service in Miami coincides nicely with the 10-month period following the trust payoff. Exhibit D is a recorded voicemail from Nana herself, verified and transcribed, in which she states unequivocally, "Dylan doesn't need it. He builds." My parents' lawyer attempted to object, but the judge overruled and the facts remained unchanged. Then, in the last blow, Jason took out the spreadsheet. "Your Honor, we've also created a report detailing my client's company development over the last 4 years. Everything is provable. From his dorm room operation to the first product launch and Shopify sales records. Every money, invoice, and tax return. There's no missing money or concealed assets. Just a young man who worked hard and succeeded without assistance." He took a break. "Meanwhile, we have evidence that the plaintiffs and their son have consistently misrepresented their financial situation to multiple parties, including their mortgage lender and this court." The court arched an eyebrow and Jason smirked. "That's why we're also filing a counterclaim for defamation, malicious prosecution, and emotional distress." I'll never forget what happened next. The judge leaned back in her chair, removed her glasses, and looked directly at my parents. "I've presided over a lot of family cases," she said, voice calm but cold. "But this is one of the more cynical attempts I've seen to weaponize the legal system against a relative for personal gain. Based on the facts given, I'm dismissing all allegations against Mr. Davis with prejudice." Boom, done. But she wasn't done. "As for the counterclaim," she said, "Mr. Davis is within his rights to seek compensation, and frankly, I think he has a case." My mother blinked quickly, her hands fiddling with her wedding ring. Their lawyer's face became pale, and Victor sat there paralyzed like a deer in headlights. My father's face flushed crimson with wrath and shame, but none of them said anything. We went out in quiet, and when we got to the hallway, Jason turned to face me. "They'll settle. Trust me, they can't afford not to." And they did. 2 weeks later, their lawyer contacted them with an offer. They would pay all of my legal fees, issue a written apology drafted by us, and waive any future legal action if I dropped the counterclaim. I didn't agree right away because I needed one more thing: the truth. I wanted the apology published, not buried in a private letter or hidden behind legal jargon. I made a formal statement on my company's website, shared it in an open letter on LinkedIn, and even featured it in the same small podcast that had sparked the first wave of support. I didn't want money from them, but I did want accountability. The day the message went up, I received over 150 emails from strangers, acquaintances, former students, and even a few old instructors, all expressing the same thing. "Thank you for telling the truth." Victor vanished from social media, and word circulated that he had left town, maybe to live with a cousin 2 states away. His name became something whispered in our village, not with adoration, but with humiliation. My parents also lost the majority of their close network. Mrs. Thompson stated that they had stopped attending church entirely, and there were no more neighborhood BBQs, no more faking. People who used to chat with them had crossed the street to avoid them. They didn't just lose the case, they lost the story because I recovered it. In the months that followed, my company doubled in size. I added 2 new product lines, recruited a small crew, and started a mentorship program for underprivileged students looking to start their own business. I dubbed it the Builders Fund, and I knew Nana would have appreciated it. I could forgive them one day, but not yet, since forgiveness is earned, and they never even tried. They believed they could steal what I created, not realizing that I am what I made, like a slap. "You want to rebalance the scales?" I said, my voice trembling. "Allows talk about scales. Let's talk about the 2 automobiles you bought him before he was even 20. How you co-signed his loans, paid off his credit cards, and allowed him move back. Every time he failed, you gave him everything. And me? I've never asked you for a penny since you were always so proud." My mother snapped. "Because I had to be." I yelled. "You never offered. You've never believed in me. You never inquired about what I was constructing. And now that it's succeeded, do you think I owe you?" After a brief period of stillness, Victor mumbled, "You wouldn't even have a future if it weren't for this family." My fist tightened. "You mean the family that is suing me?" My father took a step forward. "You can prevent all of this. If you just assist your brother in getting back on his feet, we can dismiss the claim. A clean slate? You mean hand up my money so you don't ruin my reputation?" He did not respond. I grabbed the folder and flung it back. "Get out now. My mother looked like she wanted to quarrel, and my father looked like he wanted to punch a wall. Victor didn't say anything, just turned and went away with that arrogant swagger that showed he felt he'd won. But they hadn't. They'd ignited the fire. The fallout gradually began to arrive over the next few days. A letter from their lawyer arrived first, confirming they were proceeding with the claim. Then came calls from extended family, uncles, cousins, and even old neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting to check in after hearing some things. The rumor mill was spinning fast, and everything painted me as the villain. I tried to stay focused, but I couldn't ignore how poisoned everything felt. Every email notification felt like a subpoena, and every family text felt like a trap. I stopped sleeping, and I started checking my front door twice a night. Then, 2 weeks after the break-in, I received the email that confirmed it all. It was from my bank. One of my business accounts had been frozen pending an investigation related to a legal dispute. My heart stopped, and I clicked through, my fingers trembling. I'd done nothing wrong. I'd paid all of my taxes and kept clean records, but now I was being treated like a criminal because of their baseless claims. I called the bank. They were polite but firm. The freeze would remain in place until the claim was resolved in court. Victor had promised to make things fair. He was dragging me into the mud, and my parents were handing him the rope. I thought that would be the worst of it. But then I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Victor had not just filed a lawsuit. He'd filed a restraining order against me, claiming I'd threatened him, claiming I was erratic, hostile, and a danger to his safety. I stared at the copy in disbelief. The timing wasn't a coincidence. He was attempting to portray me as unstable so that the court would believe his story rather than mine. It was character assassination, plain and simple. A smear campaign based on lies and funded by the same people who used to tuck me in at night was the tipping point. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about the lawsuit. It was about principle, about standing up to people who had used love as a leash and expected me to roll over and thank them for it. I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to apologize. And I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story of my life. They wanted a war, so I'd give them one. And the first shot would be fired at the one secret they thought I didn't know. The financial skeleton in their closet. The restraining order hearing was set for a Monday morning in early spring. The sun was out, but I barely noticed because I hadn't slept the night before. I was too wired, too angry, and too focused on every worst-case scenario running through my head. My lawyer, a guy named Jason, who I found through a friend of a friend, assured me the case was weak. "This isn't going anywhere," he'd said. "Judges can smell fabricated drama a mile away." Still, I was shaking as I walked into the courthouse. I wasn't afraid of losing the restraining order case. I was afraid of what it meant that Victor was willing to go this far. That my parents were willing to swear under oath that I was violent, unstable, and a danger to my own brother, and that they were coaching him on what to say. My parents sat behind Victor, acting as if he were the victim of a mafia vendetta, and their fingerprints were all over the document, despite the fact that their names were not on it. Mom was wiping away her fake tears. When the judge threw out the case 20 minutes in, citing insufficient evidence and a clear motive of financial retaliation, they were stunned. Victor even tried to speak again after the gavel dropped, as if he thought he could persuade the judge to change his mind. But that part was over. I wasn't relieved. I went home that day, sat on my living room floor and stared at the unopened boxes of unsent inventory stacked against the wall. Even though I'd technically won, I knew this wasn't over. The restraining order was merely a distraction, a character hit piece designed to soften me up before the lawsuit began. For the first time in years, I didn't want to work. I didn't want to fight. I just sat there in silence, feeling as if I'd lost something I couldn't name. Over the next month, everything stalled. My business accounts remained partially frozen. I moved some operations to a backup account, but the damage had already been done. My cash flow suffered. My ad budget dried up, my fulfillment timeline slowed, and some customers backed out. One of my best-selling suppliers dropped me, citing reputational risk. I tried to explain and fight through it, but the more I pushed, the more I felt like I was drowning in mud that someone else had poured on me. I was losing my footing, not only financially, but also mentally. Then came the worst blow. On a Thursday afternoon, my landlord for the warehouse space I rented, which was only 800 square feet but had become the beating heart of my operation, informed me that he was not renewing my lease due to too much legal noise. "I have other tenants. I can't afford drama." I begged. I offered to pay 3 months in advance. He didn't budge. I hung up and stared at the wall. That was the moment. Rock bottom. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet, cold. As if something inside me finally broke free and drifted away. I'd spent 3 years building something that worked, something honest, something mine. And in less than 2 months, the people who raised me had almost destroyed it. I could have folded. I even started drafting a letter to the court agreeing to settle something low, just enough to make them go away. But I didn't send it because that night, I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Her name was Sophie, and she used to be my neighbor when we were kids. We used to play backyard tag and ride bikes through the cul-de-sac, but we lost touch after she moved away in middle school. I hadn't thought of her in years, but there she was, messaging me on LinkedIn. "Hey Dylan," she wrote. "I noticed your name in a mutual post and did a double take. I remember you from back home. I am sad to hear about the litigation. I just wanted to say, don't let them take everything you've achieved. You were always the clever and quiet one. But we all knew." I read that post several times, not because it changed anything, but because it reminded me of who I used to be. I got up that night knowing that they couldn't take away the part of me that knew how to build. I was the kid who used to sell homemade candles door to door and stayed up late watching coding videos on YouTube. I went into the storage room, cleared off my whiteboard, and started again from scratch. Rebuild, rebrand, restart. I started small, with only a few hundred in liquid cash, barely enough for a single Facebook ad run, so I went organic. Reddit, Instagram Reels, TikTok snippets. I rebranded my best-selling product under a different name, with a cleaner aesthetic and a more personal voice. I built a new Shopify store using a VPN and a fresh business LLC in another state. I stayed up until 2 a.m. every night, made calls, wrote copy and learned more about web optimization in 2 weeks than I had in the previous year, and it began to work. Slowly, quietly, but it worked. My DMs were filled with customers asking where the old brand went and thanking me when I responded personally. One of them was a YouTuber who ended up featuring the product in a review. That review blew up and the orders tripled in a week. Meanwhile, the lawsuit stalled. My lawyer filed a motion to dismiss, and their team attempted to amend it. The judge pushed hearings back another month and then another, giving me time to recover and prepare. Because while they were busy spinning fairy tales about how I'd stolen Victor's future, I was busy collecting receipts, not just business receipts, but family receipts, tax records, which weren't easy to get, but they were real. My Nana, before she passed away, had sent me a manila envelope of her own back when she still lived alone. Victor had gotten a large payout, enough to pay off his college loans, start a business, or buy a house. But he blew it. Gambling, bars, trips, crypto scams, all gone within a year. And he knew it. My parents also knew it, but they never expected me to find out. I also discovered an old voicemail from Nana, who left it a few weeks before her death. Her voice was feeble but clear. "I hope you're doing well, Dylan. I simply wanted to express that I am proud of you. I wish others saw what I see. Keep going. And don't let them shame you into helping those who have never attempted to rescue themselves." The tides were turning, but I didn't tell anyone. I stayed quiet. I kept building. I moved my entire operation into a friend's garage temporarily. He ran a coffee roasting business and let me use his back room for shipping. I played that message on repeat the night I had it transcribed for evidence. I became invisible for a while. I let them think I was losing, and I let them tell stories about how the truth was catching up with me. All the while I was watching, waiting, and preparing for the next phase, because the court date would come soon, and I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd dismantle everything they'd built, not out of vengeance, but because some people only learn when you stop letting them write your story and hand them a copy of the real one. And believe me, I was writing every word. They had no idea I had the file, which made it so satisfying. The documents from Nana's estate, the ones I discovered tucked inside that envelope she mailed before she died, weren't just sentimental relics. They were a blueprint, a timeline, and a receipt. The kind of things my parents assumed would never see the light of day. After all, Victor had torched through that money before the ink on the check had dried. Who would remember? Who would care? Well, me. I scanned everything, highlighted key figures, the trust fund, the disbursement details, the fact that Victor had been given an $80,000 payout at age 22 under the condition that it be used for long-term growth and development, but my name was nowhere to be found. I hadn't received a penny. The nicest part was Nana's handwritten message on the back of the final page, only 6 words in her cursive scroll. "Dylan doesn't need it. He builds." 6 words that shattered my parents' whole narrative. 6 words that exposed Victor's sob tale for what it was. An inheritance wasted rather than stolen. A future he set on fire. But I didn't go public with it yet. The case was still plodding along, and my parents' lawyer continued trying to put hearings back, which was okay with me. Every week that went gave me time to grow stronger and them more rope to hang themselves with. While they delayed, I began digging. I reached out to an old neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who used to live across from us growing up, and she remembered everything, including the day Victor received the check and the brand new car that appeared in our driveway a week later. People talk, especially when you're polite and quiet. Mrs. Thompson told me over tea, "Your Nana," about the parties and screaming scenes between him and my father when the money ran out. She always thought he'd spend it. She was not blind. You know, she simply didn't want to harm your mother. I didn't even have to request a statement. She provided one. Word spread, and I soon had a little file full of messages, texts, and even images. Victor in Vegas, champagne in hand, Victor on a boat, tagged in an old college friend's Instagram post, clutching a bottle of Grey Goose and flipping at the camera, all within 10 months of Nana's trust being paid out, painted a picture that was loud, brash, and irrefutable. But that wasn't the only angle I was working. I had one more card to play, one that required some finesse. The first person I called was Mr. Collins, who used to be our family accountant back when my parents still filed their taxes correctly. I hadn't seen him in years, but he remembered me right away. "Dylan, you were the quiet one, right? The polite one." "I need a favor," I said. I wasn't sure he'd comply, but when I told him about the lawsuit, the restraining order and the charges, he grew quiet. Real quiet. "They told me you stole from them," he said after a beat. "They said you were hiding something big, but I didn't believe it." "Why not?" "Because I did their taxes the year they got that trust distribution. Rachel told me it was for Victor's future, seed money for a tech business, and I recorded it as a gift transfer, precisely as she requested." "Are you prepared to put that in writing?" I inquired, followed by a silence. "I'll do better," he answered. "I've still got the files." He emailed them the next morning, so I had proof from 3 ways. Nana's trust paperwork, eyewitness evidence, and tax records prove Victor got money he did not disclose during discovery. My lawyer nearly fell out of his chair when I handed him the file. "They're cooked," Jason remarked, flicking over the pages. "And this is no longer merely a defense. This is counterclaim material." I nodded. "That's the plan." But I didn't just want to win. I wanted to change the narrative. So I started laying out something else, something more public. I rebuilt my brand under a new name, with a different domain, visuals, and everything. But this time, I focused on the story, not the lawsuit itself, just the broad strokes. "Built from scratch," I said in the About page, "bootstrapped, no handouts. Every dollar earned the hard way." I never named names. I didn't have to. People knew. Old customers returned. New ones followed. Word spread. Someone began a Reddit post about the rebrand and it took fire. "This is how you bounce back." One remark said, "This guy's work ethic is incredible." My email list has quadrupled. Revenue recovered. I remained silent because I was still waiting for one more item to come into place. Victor's next move. It arrived sooner than expected. Jason called me one morning when I was packaging orders. "They filed an emergency motion." "For what?" "Freeze your personal assets. They say you're hiding money." I should have been enraged and panicked, but instead I grinned and said, "Let them try." While they were playing checkers, intoxicated on wrath and entitlement, I was putting up the chessboard. Everything I had was now secured by a new LLC. Jason chuckled when he saw the paperwork. The property was transferred to a trust, the automobile was leased via the firm, and my savings were split between 2 accounts under different holding companies. "You've been busy." "They taught me well," I told them. "Never trust anyone, not even family." We opposed the motion with everything. The tax records, the trust documents, the timeline, Mrs. Thompson's letter, Mr. Collins' statement, a full audit trail of my business's growth from the day I started selling phone accessories out of my dorm room to the day I bought my house. It was surgical and devastating, but I wasn't done. Here's the thing about people like Victor and my parents. They don't just want money, they want control, the ability to shape the story and to say, "You owe us," and have everyone believe it. So, I planned one final move. Something public, something permanent. I scheduled a small podcast interview with a fellow entrepreneur I'd met years ago. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral. But it was honest. For an hour I told my story. Not the lawsuit, not the revenge, but the real story. About growing up in the shadow of someone who could do no wrong. About building a business at night while the rest of my family laughed at me. About paying off student loans with side hustle money, and about the power of being underestimated. Sometimes, I explained. The toughest part isn't beginning from scratch. It starts from behind, when the people who should have helped you are the ones who hold you back. The show aired a week later, and the response was overwhelming. DMs, emails, and comments from strangers who said they recognized themselves in my remarks. People who had been cut down by their own families, who had had to battle for every inch. But more than that, people began asking questions about the litigation, which my parents were not prepared to answer. Their lawyer contacted Jason in a panic. "We'd like to revisit settlement discussions," he told me. "We're not interested," Jason said. Because it was too late. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was setting the terms. The next hearing was fast approaching, and I was prepared. Not just with evidence, not just with allies, but with the unshakable truth that no matter how many times they tried to rewrite my story, I still held the pen. And soon, I'd use it to end theirs. The courtroom was colder than I remembered, not physically, but in that sterile, stiff kind of cold that you get in your spine when you know something irreversible is about to happen. The walls were beige, the lighting was fluorescent, and there was no dramatic music, just the hum of tension as everyone took their seats. It had been 8 months since they first filed the lawsuit. 8 months since my parents and my golden child brother Victor decided I owed them the life he had squandered. 8 months of venomous texts, weaponized family gossip, and pathetic attempts to destroy everything I'd built on my own since I was 18 years old. And now it was time. Victor sat next to their attorney in a wrinkled suit he didn't know how to wear, chewing the inside of his cheek like he was trying to disappear into his seat. My parents were behind him, both dressed like they were attending a church fundraiser. Mom in pearls and pastel. Dad stiff in a blazer that didn't quite fit around his stomach anymore, and they refused to look at me. My lawyer Jason shuffled papers beside me. I was nervous, but it was a strange quiet calm. The kind you only get when you've spent months preparing for a moment with such surgical precision. There was nothing left to panic about, everything had already been set in motion. He leaned over and whispered, "This is going to be fun." The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s, called everyone to order. The hearing began with their lawyer laying out the same tired argument that I had unfairly benefited from family resources, that I'd misled my parents into believing I was self-made, and that Victor's life had been derailed because I hoarded financial assets that should have been shared. The remarks sounded desperate and empty, and suddenly it was our turn. Jason stepped up. No theatrics, no yelling, just facts. "Your Honor," he started, "we will demonstrate 3 things. First, my client Dylan did not get any financial support or inheritance from his family. Second, the plaintiff's son, Victor, acquired $80,000 from a family trust and spent it foolishly. And third, that this lawsuit is a malicious attempt to extract funds from my client under false pretenses after the plaintiffs failed to control their own finances or their son." He then threw the file away. Exhibit A, Nana's trust paperwork, plainly state that the money was for Victor and only Victor. My name wasn't mentioned. Exhibit B, the notarized letter from Mr. Collins, their former accountant, confirming he filed that gift as a trust distribution with explicit instructions from my mother. Exhibit C shows a timeline of Victor's social media posts, travel logs, and online purchases. Everything from designer footwear to bottle service in Miami coincides nicely with the 10-month period following the trust payoff. Exhibit D is a recorded voicemail from Nana herself, verified and transcribed, in which she states unequivocally, "Dylan doesn't need it. He builds." My parents' lawyer attempted to object, but the judge overruled, and the facts remained unchanged. Then, in the last blow, Jason took out the spreadsheet. "Your Honor, we've also created a report detailing my client's company development over the last 4 years. Everything is provable. From his dorm room operation to the first product launch and Shopify sales records, every money, invoice and tax return. There's no missing money or concealed assets. Just a young man who worked hard and succeeded without assistance." He took a break. "Meanwhile, we have evidence that the plaintiffs and their son have consistently misrepresented their financial situation to multiple parties, including their mortgage lender and this court." The court arched an eyebrow and Jason smirked. "That's why we're also filing a counterclaim for defamation, malicious prosecution, and emotional distress." I'll never forget what happened next. The judge leaned back in her chair, removed her glasses and looked directly at my parents. "I've presided over a lot of family cases," she said, voice calm but cold. "But this is one of the more cynical attempts I've seen to weaponize the legal system against a relative for personal gain. Based on the facts given, I'm dismissing all allegations against Mr. Davis with prejudice." Boom, done. But she wasn't done. As for the counterclaim, she said. "Mr. Davis is within his rights to seek compensation. And frankly, I think he has a case." My mother blinked quickly, her hands fiddling with her wedding ring. Their lawyer's face became pale, and Victor sat there paralyzed like a deer in headlights. My father's face flushed crimson with wrath and shame, but none of them said anything. We went out in quiet, and when we got to the hallway, Jason turned to face me. "They'll settle. Trust me, they can't afford not to." And they did. 2 weeks later, their lawyer contacted them with an offer. They would pay all of my legal fees, issue a written apology drafted by us, and waive any future legal action if I dropped the counterclaim. I didn't agree right away because I needed one more thing. The truth. I wanted the apology published, not buried in a private letter or hidden behind legal jargon. I made a formal statement on my company's website, shared it in an open letter on LinkedIn, and even featured it in the same small podcast that had sparked the first wave of support. I didn't want money from them, but I did want accountability. The day the message went up, I received over 150 emails from strangers, acquaintances, former students, and even a few old instructors, all expressing the same thing. "Thank you for telling the truth." Victor vanished from social media, and word circulated that he had left town, maybe to live with a cousin 2 states away. His name became something whispered in our village, not with adoration, but with humiliation. My parents also lost the majority of their close network. Mrs. Thompson stated that they had stopped attending church entirely, and there were no more neighborhood BBQs, no more faking. People who used to chat with them had crossed the street to avoid them. They didn't just lose the case, they lost the story because I recovered it. In the months that followed, my company doubled in size. I added 2 new product lines, recruited a small crew, and started a mentorship program for underprivileged students looking to start their own business. I dubbed it the Builders Fund, and I knew Nana would have appreciated it. I could forgive them one day, but not yet, since forgiveness is earned and they never even tried. They believed they could steal what I created, not realizing that I am what I made. My mom let my sister take my room. When I said no, they called me selfish. I moved out with everything I paid for and left them to struggle. Living at home seemed like a good idea to me as I worked on my profession and saved money. It seems that I was merely funding other people's decisions. I stepped away when they crossed the boundary, and that's when everything went wrong. Let me tell how it began. My name is Ethan. I'm in my early 30s. I work remotely in a technical sector that pays well if you stay focused and don't mess about. I returned back home 3 years ago on purpose, not because I had run out of alternatives. It made financial sense, and it allowed me to devote real time to work while not wasting money on rent in a place where I seldom slept. Living at home was not a gloomy situation. It was a bargain. I paid rent on time every month, covered the internet, divided utilities, and frequently went grocery shopping without keeping track. Nobody was carrying me. If anything, I was assisting to keep the facility operating. I didn't brag about it or beg for applause. I just did my thing and kept in my lane. My work is not one that can be done from a laptop on the couch. I need a reliable and quiet setup. My room was more than simply a bedroom. It was my workstation. Desk, monitors, hardware and cords were all routed, clean, and in their proper locations. I created it over time, piece by piece, and maintained it tight. When I closed the door, I was at work. Simple as that. My mom, Sarah, owned the house. She enjoyed reminding people of this when it suited her. Sarah operates on emotion first and logic second. She doesn't shout much, but she can influence the vibe in a room. If she is worried, everyone notices. If she remains cool, everything will be okay. She did, however, rely on me financially more than she wanted to acknowledge. Bills did not disappear on their own, and she never refused my assistance. We got along because I did not push her. I kept a low profile, paid my debts, and did not question her authority in the home. That was an unspoken understanding. I did not need to be in command. All I needed was for my space to be respected. Outside the house, I had one person who kept things genuine with me. My Uncle Tom. He's older, has worked his entire life and doesn't sugarcoat anything. We had coffee every couple weeks. He was aware of my circumstances and did not pass judgment, but he did caution me several times. He informed me straight up that paying bills in a house you don't own always goes sideways. His words, not mine. He remarked, "The second people get used to your money, they forget your boundaries." I heard him, but I didn't expect it to get complicated with my own family. Everything was steady at the moment. There's no reason to blow it up. That changed when Sarah casually sat me down one evening. She informed me that my younger sister Megan was returning to stay for a bit. Megan had 2 children, and her relationship did not work out again. Sarah characterized it as temporary assistance. A few weeks, maybe a month, till Megan determined out her next step. I did not rush to argue. Megan is my sister. I am not heartless. Life strikes people occasionally, and I'm not the type of man who says it's not my problem right away. I asked some simple inquiries. How long, where they'd remain, and what their plans were. Sarah waved much of it off. We said we would sort things out. The aforementioned family assists their members. He said it wouldn't really affect me. Sarah had a habit of approaching my work as if it were optional. Like, because I worked from home, it wasn't authentic in the sense she valued, and she'd become accustomed to another notion. I was not going anywhere. I paid. I remained quiet. I kept the lights on. In her mind, that meant I'd adapt no matter what. That was when I halted. Megan and I do not have a close connection. She's always been noisy, reactive, and accustomed to having her way. Sarah frequently covered for her as she grew up. Megan received anything she required. If Megan made a mistake, someone else corrected it. I quickly realized that resisting that dynamic only resulted in headaches. So, when Sarah mentioned Megan was moving in, I didn't say no. But I did clock it. I understood how things might go if the lines were not clear. I told Sarah only one thing and kept it simple. My room remains mine. My work environment remains unaffected. I wasn't requesting permission. I was stating terms. She nodded and replied, "Of course." She indicated that she understood. Replied, "I was worrying too much." That was what she always said when she didn't intend to impose anything. "You're worrying too much," was her method of closing the conversation without agreeing on the real conditions. She wasn't thinking, "What happens if he leaves?" She was thinking, "He'll calm down. He always does." I didn't really believe it, but I let it go. In my thoughts, I create limits anyway. I made a decision about what I would and would not tolerate. I wasn't going to fight, and I wasn't going to bend either. I'd invested too much time and money in my career to let it devolve into anarchy. Megan was returning with the kids in tow. Sarah was already in protective mode, and I had a nasty feeling that the little while didn't mean what she thought it did. That was when I stopped expecting things would remain fair and began paying closer attention. Megan arrived on a Tuesday afternoon with little notice other than a text from Sarah saying, "They're almost here." Not "she's here." 2 cars came up, both packed, bags, bins, and loose items stacked high, as if she wasn't intending on leaving anytime soon. She didn't enter like a visitor, she walked in as if regaining territory. Megan seemed exhausted and furious before she even entered the doorway. No greeting to me, just a short nod before grumbling about the travel, the weather, and how difficult things had been lately. Sarah instantly went into comfort mode, collecting Megan's baggage, asking questions, and encouraging her to sit down. The children raced inside without being directed. Jake was older, louder, and bounced off the walls. Ben followed him around, grabbing anything he could grasp. Shoes remained on, while bags fell to the floor. They handled it like a public building. I remained out of it at first. I returned to my room and locked the door. That was the accord in my mind. Allow them to settle. Do not hover. Do not create problems that do not exist yet. That lasted around an hour. I heard steps upstairs. More than once. The children hurried down the hall, laughing and banging doors. I cracked up my door and observed them dashing in and out of rooms like if it were a game. Megan did not say anything. Sarah did not either. When I got downstairs, Megan was chattering nonstop in the kitchen. She scarcely hesitated as I stepped in. She inquired again what I did for work, as if she hadn't previously been informed. I provided a short response. She chuckled and mentioned something about computers and how relaxing it must be to sit around all day. I did not respond. Joyce also laughed, as if it were innocent. I let it go once. Later that night, as I was preparing supper, Jake began inquiring about my room, what was in it, why the door was locked, and why I had to lock it. Megan joked that I was keeping something cool up there. I shut it off immediately away. I explained that my room was my office, not a play area. I mentioned that the equipment in there wasn't toys and wasn't inexpensive. I told the kids they couldn't go in there. I was not harsh about it. I wasn't loud. I was clear. Sarah nodded as if she agreed. Megan rolled her eyes and replied, "Okay," in the same tone that people use when they aren't serious. Over the next few days the home became more noisier. Megan remained up late, watching shows at maximum volume. The youngsters woke up early and never stopped running through the house. The cabinets were left open. Food went quickly. The groceries I purchased were suddenly for everyone. Sarah reframed every situation she encountered. She kept telling us we just needed to adjust. Megan was anxious, the kids were going through a lot and family helps family. No one mentioned restrictions. Megan constantly commenting on my work. She questioned why I required such a large space and all that equipment. She joked that today's youth make money doing nothing online. Sarah never corrected her. I reiterated myself once again. Same phrases, same relaxed tone. My room remains off limits. My equipment isn't affected. If the children require more room, we devise an alternative plan. Megan smiled and replied, "Sure." That evening I saw Jake halfway up the stairs, headed toward my room. I told him to stop. He did, but he appeared bewildered.
Same.
As if he had already been informed everything was all right. Megan did not back me up. She just replied he was intrigued and strolled off. That's when I discovered people weren't taking my limits seriously. A few days later my Aunt Lily came by. She is Sarah's sister and she does not sugarcoat anything. She waited in the living room for about 10 minutes before approaching me and asking if this was the new arrangement. I promised her it was only temporary. She arched an eyebrow as if she did not believe it at all. She advised me to keep an eye on my belongings and not trust that others will respect space just because they should. Following that, I paid closer attention. I started noticing little things. When I arrived home my door was unlocked, despite the fact that I always lock it. My chair was slightly out of place. One of my desk drawers was partially shoved in. Nothing was lost or broken. But there was evidence that someone had been in there. I asked Sarah about it. She said she knew nothing and advised me not to blame anyone. Megan said the kids hadn't gone in there and laughed as if it were silly. I did not argue. I just started locking my door whenever I went, even for brief errands. One afternoon I returned from collecting lunch. I proceeded upstairs out of habit and came to a stop in the hallway. My door was unlocked. I stood there for a second, hand on the knob, already aware that something had changed. That alone was incorrect. I've never left it open. I walked inside and saw it wasn't simply someone snooping around. My room was rearranged. My bed was shoved against the wall and covered in toys. Not a few items thrown in, but a whole display like a playroom. Plastic containers are packed beside my closet. My workstation was not where it belonged. It had been hauled sideways with cables pulled free. One monitor was disconnected and lying against a wall. Another had fingerprints all over the screen. Jake was seated in my recliner, feet up and spinning gently. Ben was on the floor, surrounded by my belongings like they were a treasure trove. Neither of them appeared perplexed. They did not appear to be uncomfortable. I questioned what they were doing in my room. Sarah rushed up the stairs before either of the kids could answer. She did not glance around. She stared at me and ordered me to mind my tone. She claimed I was scaring the kids and should calm down. Megan walked behind her, arms folded and already annoyed. She stated the kids needed more room, and this made perfect sense. She stated the guest room was too tiny and my room was more suitable. I pointed to my workstation and inquired why my equipment was disconnected. Sarah stated it wasn't harmed and that I could plug it back in later. Megan said the kids had not touched anything essential. I explained that the room was more than simply a place for me to sleep. I informed them that I paid rent for it and utilized it for work. I informed them that shifting my belongings without asking was not acceptable. Sarah stopped me off and stated it was her house, thus she made the decisions. She stated that things change when a family requires assistance. She accused me of being unyielding. I said that paying rent without having a say made no sense. I stated that if I am expected to participate, my space should be respected. Megan laughed and told me I was overreacting. She stated I didn't need all of that room. She stated the kids had it tougher than I had, and I should think about someone other than myself for once. Sarah supported her up. Spacked. She claimed I was theatrical and selfish. She stated I was always complicating things and couldn't just let them go. I inquired how long they intended to use my room. Sarah responded she had no idea, and that everything hinged on Megan getting back on her feet. Megan told me not to hurry her and that I would not understand because I didn't have children. I replied I needed access to my belongings. Sarah told me I could get what I needed, but I shouldn't wander in and out whenever I pleased since it might confuse the kids. Megan stated that was their room now, and I needed to respect it. That's when things really clicked. They were not asking. They were not bargaining. They had already made their decision. I stated that if anything in that room broke, I intended to have it replaced. Megan rolled her eyes and said the children were not destructive. Sarah claimed I was thinking the worst and acting as if everyone was against me. I didn't argue anymore. There was nothing to quarrel about. They had previously revised the scenario. Thus I was the problem. That night I waited until the home was silent. I didn't say what I was doing. I did not seek permission. I walked upstairs and started bringing out what was important. I couldn't replace my laptop, external storage, audio equipment, or other electronics soon. I carefully packed everything and brought it to my car in short trips. Nobody stopped me. No one asked any questions. The following morning, Sarah observed that the desk was mainly vacant. Monitors are gone, hardware is gone, and the vital stuff is already out. She inquired about where my belongings had gone. I informed her that I had temporarily relocated my work equipment. She disliked it, but she did not press. Later that day she warned me that I shouldn't enter the room unless I required anything particular. She said that it was best for everyone if I kept out of the way. Megan agreed, saying I had to accept that things had changed. I nodded but did not answer. That night I secured my car with my equipment inside and went to bed in the guest room, aware that something essential had changed. Not the room, but the scenario. That's when I quit trying to mend things. I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped assuming my contributions were important. I was still paying for my accommodation. I just wasn't permitted to use it anymore. Work quickly deteriorated once I removed my equipment from the room. And it was not subtle. It wasn't an awful day or an unpleasant afternoon. It was consistent. Every endeavor to do anything became a war with the surroundings. I initially tried working from the kitchen table. I thought I could make it work for a few hours at a time. It lasted around 15 minutes. The kids were constantly in and out of the kitchen, running about, jumping on chairs, peeking over my shoulder, asking what I was doing, and snatching my laptop like it was a toy. Megan never corrected them. Sarah would respond, "They're just curious." As if that explained the fingerprints on my screen. I moved to the living room late at night, figuring it would be calmer after the kids went to bed. It was not. Megan remained up late, watching shows at maximum volume. She did not inquire whether it disturbed me. She did not reduce it while I was on calls. Headphones did not solve anything. I could still hear laughter, yelling, and unexpected noises that sliced through whatever I was listening to. Calls were interrupted. I had to apologize again and reschedule meetings. Deadlines started to slip, not because I wasn't trying, but because I couldn't finish anything neatly. I didn't skip work because I was lazy. I was missing work because I didn't have enough room to do it. I mentioned it calmly more than once. I did not bang doors or accuse anyone. I presented choices that didn't screw anyone over. I kept everything realistic. The guest room may be functional if we changed it. The children might alternate rooms for a while. I could shift my workstation temporarily. If I had a door, I could close it. I was not demanding that things return to normal overnight. I just wanted something functional so that I could do my job. Sarah dismissed every proposal without thinking about it. She didn't ask questions or consider alternatives. She said the guest room was too tiny. She stated the rotation would confuse the children. She said I was complicating matters and causing stress for everyone. Megan did not even pretend to consider it. She chuckled and said I should be able to handle a minor inconvenience. She stated that those with actual duties do not have the right to complain about their comfort. Every time she spoke it seemed less like worry, and more like entitlement, as if she had already decided my concerns weren't important. Then she became louder. She said I was not stepping up. She mentioned familial sacrifices which I definitely didn't comprehend. She remarked, I was lucky I didn't have kids depending on me, and that I had no idea what pressure really was. She spoke as if struggle was a competition, and she had already determined she would win. Sarah nodded along. She kept saying Megan needed help, and I was in a better position to adapt. She claimed I was young, flexible, and would be okay. Each phrase returned to the same position. I can handle it, therefore I should. At the same time, Sarah began to ask for money more regularly. Not rent, but extra money for groceries, electricity, and other unexpected needs. It was not framed as assistance. It was framed just as expected. Like my participation was presumed, and challenging it was absurd. Megan never offered anything. She didn't say anything about donating. She did not inquire about the price of items. She didn't recommend joining in. She simply pretended everything was under control. The house became noisier. Megan brought guests over without saying anything. Friends, children, and individuals I didn't know. The living room became a permanent hangout. Noise never stopped. There was constantly someone speaking, laughing, and moving about. One afternoon I discovered a slight bend in one of my cables where it had been yanked. Another night I discovered my chair scuffed up. Small things, but not by mistake. What happens when people do not care, when they handle your belongings like they're already communal? That's when I began keeping track. I snapped shots of the room when I went in to get something. I jotted down the dates that my door was left open or my belongings were relocated. I maintained receipts not because I intended to defend each issue, but because I needed a clear record of what was happening. I wanted to be sure I wasn't dreaming it. Lily came by again at the conclusion of the week. She sat in the living room for about 10 minutes, watching the turmoil, listening to the noise and noting how nobody corrected anything. She then drew me away. She informed me it wasn't about space anymore. She said that they were testing me to see how far I would go if they continued pressing. She said that once people become used to you giving in, they stop asking. She remarked, "The longer I stayed quiet, the worse it would get." That night I sat Sarah down. I did not raise my voice. I made no accusations against anyone. I set it out cleanly. I informed her that my job was hurting. I informed her I was paying rent for a place I was not permitted to use. I informed her I had proposed options, but none of them had been considered. Sarah sighed, as if I had exhausted her. She stated I was making things tougher than they needed to be. She suggested I needed to be more understanding. I informed her that I was done compromising. I informed her that either my room came back to me or I was going out. I did not threaten. I expressed it. Sarah did not take the ultimatum seriously. The morning after I lay it out, she pretended nothing had occurred. She inquired, "You want coffee?" As if we'd had a typical night. She chatted about the errands she needed to run. She asked if I might bring a box later. She did not mention my room once. When I mentioned that I was behind on work since I didn't have a space to complete it, she dismissed it with, "It'll calm down soon." I assumed the problem was just noise and time, not the fact that they had taken what I was paying for. Megan treated it even less seriously. She laughed freely, like if I had told a joke. She leaned on the counter one day and said, "You'll cool off when you see what rent costs." Then she added, "Places aren't cheap. You'll be back in a month." She claimed I didn't realize how fortunate I was and that I was acting theatrical about a room. I did not react. I stopped explaining. I stopped correcting her. I didn't need to win the debate. I needed a solution. So I started planning. During my breaks, I glanced at the listings. I ran the numbers late at night. I worked out what I really needed and what I could cut. I was not looking for a dream residence. I needed a door, dependable internet, and silence. That was it. A place where I could work and sleep without someone regarding it as public property. Within a week, I had found a place that worked. A little room in an older building, clean enough but nothing special. The landlord was straightforward, didn't ask a million questions, and didn't mind that I worked from home as long as the rent arrived. It cost more than I paid Sarah, but it was manageable provided I remained diligent. I did not inform anyone. I signed the lease, paid the deposit, received the keys, and placed them in my glove box as if they were a spare set. I kept moving the same way I usually did, quietly and steadily, with no huge pronouncements. Then I began segregating things. The internet was under my name. I planned the transfer. There were a few subscriptions associated with the home. I changed my payments such that the rent ended the day I moved. I didn't threaten anyone with it. I didn't give a speech. I simply handled it like an adult. The supplier informed me that service at Sarah's address will be cut off the morning my new service was activated because the account was relocating with me. A few days later, the mood in the house changed. Sarah began asking questions about bills that she had never asked before. "Did you pay for the internet yet?" she said too carelessly. She added that food had just become more expensive, as if she was testing the concept that I would cover it without being asked. She did not state it explicitly, but I could sense she was under strain. Megan started protesting as well. She stated that things were tighter than she imagined. She believed Sarah had more saved. She shouted her remarks in the living room at full voice as if she wanted the entire house to know how unjust it was. Never once did she remark, "I can help." She never inquired as to the root cause of anything. The tension did not burst immediately. It simmered. Small disagreements, strong tones, and doors closing more forcefully than required. Megan snaps at the kids more frequently. Sarah is becoming silent and short with everyone. Then I became annoyed about minor issues. The home had a continual edge about it. One wrong statement might send someone off. I kept out of it. I told Sarah about my plans to move the night before. I waited until Megan was busy and the house was silent. No audience means no drama. "I found a place," I explained. "I'm moving tomorrow." She paused for a second, as if her head needed to catch up. "Tomorrow?" she asked. "Yes." Her expression altered quickly. She began discussing timing and how abrupt it was. She requested more notice. She said she was unprepared for this. When I requested to return to my room, I informed her that I had given notice. That's when she went straight for the money. "How am I supposed to cover bills?" she inquired. "Are you still paying rent next month too? You can't just cut us off like this." I answered, "You'll have to figure it out." Megan entered halfway through the chat, and Sarah informed her that I was moving out. Megan initially laughed, as if it was a joke. "Okay," she said, smiling as if she had caught me bluffing. "Sure you are." She knew I wasn't playing. Her voice rose up quickly. She called me selfish. She said I was forsaking family. She said I was doing this on purpose to punish them. She said I was attempting to make her appear terrible and keep her stuck. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I told her the truth once. "I'm not paying to be shut out of my own space." Megan yelled back that I was wrecking everything, screaming a tantrum, and that no one would assist her right now. She began detailing her difficulties, as if I was meant to feel responsible for them. Sarah alternated between terror and wrath. She claimed 1 minute she didn't believe I'd leave. The next thing she said was that I was overreacting and making mistakes. I did not adjust my tone. I did not apologize. I informed Sarah that I had already shifted my work equipment. I told her I'd be leaving in the morning. I informed her I was not bargaining. Megan said something beneath her breath about my crawling back. I disregarded it. That night, the home was really noisy. The cabinets slammed. Kids are restless. Megan paced about, as if she wanted to keep the tension going. Sarah remained in her room. I packed the remainder of my personal belongings gently. Clothes, books, whatever I didn't want to lose. The heavy stuff remained overnight. Desk, chair, any leftover cords, and boxes. I was not carrying stuff out alone in the dark. That was for the morning. When I was finished, I shut the guest room door for the final time and laid down. For the first time in weeks, my mind was silent. There will be no rushing in the corridor, no bickering, no waiting below, and no need to explain myself repeatedly. They assumed I was faking. I was not. I arrived early with Lily. There's no notification or warning text. I wanted everything done cleanly and quickly. Lily stepped out of the car first and took a quick glance at the house before saying, "Let's get your stuff and go." She wasn't there to dispute with anybody. She was there to ensure that nothing got out of control. Megan was on edge from the time we came in. She did not even say hi. She merely gazed at us as if we were trespassers. "What's she doing here?" she questioned Sarah, loud enough to be heard. Lily smiled nicely. Megan sneered. "I'm helping my nephew move." "He's not moving. This is ridiculous." I didn't say anything. I went straight for the stairs. Megan stepped ahead of me at the bottom. "You're not going up there," she said. "The kids are sleeping." I did not raise my voice. I did not slow down. "Move," I stated calmly and flatly. She did not. She crossed her arms and positioned herself as if it would work. Lily approached me. "Megan," she stated steadily. "This isn't your house." Megan jerked her head toward Lily. "Stay out of it. This is family business." Lily didn't flinch. "Exactly." I stepped by Megan, not touching her. She took a half step back, astonished. Sarah arrived from the kitchen, all worked up. "What is going on?" Sarah insisted. "Why are you doing this today?" I said. "I had informed you yesterday." "I'm moving." Sarah's face crumbled, then stiffened. She moved from crying to angry in a matter of seconds. "You're tearing this family apart," she stated. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" I continued to move. When I opened the door to what used to be my room, the chaos struck me again. Toys are everywhere. Food wrappers are on my desk. My chair was crammed into the corner. Stuff I didn't recognize was stacked on previously clear shelves. I'd already removed my things, but they had continued to live in there as if it were their own. So, in the meanwhile, things had deteriorated rather than improved. Megan dashed in after me. "You can't just barge in here," she said. "This is their room." "It's my stuff," I explained, immediately disconnecting what remained. "I'm taking it," she said, raising her voice. "You're abandoning your nieces. You're really doing this to kids." Lily came to their rescue. "Stop using your kids as a shield," she advised. Megan whirled on her. "This is about control. You don't get to talk to me like that." Lily refused to back down. "Then don't act like this," Sarah said, standing at the doorway and weeping again. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with this," she told me. "I thought you'd calm down." I did not look at her. I continued packing. I received what I paid for. Desk, chair, remaining equipment, cable boxes. Nothing more, nothing petty, just mine. Megan hovered and made remarks the entire time. You're selfish. You think money makes you better than everyone. You'll regret this. I didn't reply. She attempted to grab one of the crates. Lily stood between us right away. Don't, she said. Megan put her hands up. That's his property. Sarah said. Unbelievable. He's really doing this. This is my house. She shouted. You don't get to just take things and walk out. I eventually turned to face her. Then you shouldn't have taken my room while taking my rent. That silenced her for a while. The kids awoke throughout all of this. Jake stood in the corridor observing. Ben began weeping. Megan pointed at them as evidence. Look at what you're doing, she remarked. You're hurting them. I didn't say anything. Lily knelt down and ordered the children to return to the living room. Sarah led them away, still weeping and moaning about how unjust it all was. Once the room was empty, the tone changed. Sarah recognized she was not going to stop me. Megan recognized that shouting wasn't effective. They both simply watched as I hauled boxes out. Nobody helped. Nobody volunteered to make things easy. They simply stood there, startled. Sarah followed me outside when I finished loading the final box into the car. You can't just leave us like this, she explained. We're family. I opened and closed the trunk. Family doesn't lock you out of your own space. Megan yelled from the doorway. Don't come crying back when this blows up in your face. I gave her a quick look. I won't. I got into the car. Lily climbed in with me. There are no parting embraces or speeches, only the sound of the engine turning over. As we drove away, I didn't glance back. My new house was silent. At first it seemed too quiet. We unloaded quickly. Lily helped me take everything up and made no comment about the space. When the final package was inside, she turned to me and said, You did the right thing. I nodded. After she went, I shut the door and leaned against it for a while. There was no yelling, no footsteps, and no sense of tension in the air. I was finally able to breathe after weeks. Things started to break down faster than I thought. I'd been gone for less than a week when the first phone came in. Sarah didn't inquire how I was doing or if I'd settled in. She asked about the internet. The internet's gone, she added. Did you cancel it? It transferred with me, I explained. It was in my name. There was a delay, as if she did not grasp the statement. Then her tone became sharper. Well, you need to put it back. Megan needs it for the kids. I don't live there anymore, I explained. You'll have to set it up. She hung up. 2 days later, the utilities began to pile up. Sarah texted images of bills such as evidence, electricity, water, and a past due notice that she had never mentioned previously. There's no explanation, just numbers and question marks. I once said, I'm not paying bills for a house I don't live in. This irritated her. She called, already shouting. She said I abandoned her in a crisis. She called me reckless. She claimed I owed her extra money for the rest of the month since I failed to give her adequate notice. You took my room while taking my rent. I answered, that was the notice. She called me ungrateful and hung up. Megan remained quiet at first. That did not last. A few days later she texted me as if nothing had occurred. There was no apology or responsibility, just polite casual communications asking how my apartment was and whether I had straightened things out yet. I didn't respond. She tried again later that night. This time, it was about money. Sarah's really stressed, she wrote. We're all under a lot of pressure right now. Maybe you could help out a little until things settle, I said one day. You live there. You can help. That's when the tone changed. She said I was being unkind. She thought I was punishing the children. She said that I was intentionally causing her to fail. She claimed she would never do this to me. I didn't participate. Without the internet, the home became noisier. The youngsters were unable to stream anything. Megan regularly complained to Sarah. Sarah snapped back. Arguments began to take place in the open rather than behind closed doors. Then Sarah made it public. She wrote online about how her kid walked away during a difficult period. She didn't say my name, but it was evident. Messages started arriving immediately away. Cousins, an aunt I seldom spoke with, and one of Sarah's acquaintances. It's the same question every time. What actually happened? I disregarded it for a day. Then I stopped pretending that stillness equaled maturity. I did not compose an essay. I did not debate in the comments. I simply posted one item. The facts. Screenshots of my rent transfers. The internet bill is in my name. Time-stamped photographs of my room before and after they were shot. No insults. No speeches. Just evidence. The tone shifted after that. People stopped asking what happened and instead asked why Sarah left that bit out. The post vanished the following day. Then texts started rolling in. Cousins, an aunt I seldom spoke with, and one of Sarah's acquaintances. They all had similar questions. What exactly happened? I told them the truth. Short and clean. I paid the rent. I paid the bills. My room was taken. I was shut out. I left. Most of them stopped responding after that. A few people claimed they understood. One responded, "I don't blame you." The post vanished the next day. Megan's circumstances worsened after that. With the internet down and expenses piling up, Sarah began pressuring her to contribute. Megan pushed back loudly. They battled regularly. Sarah expected Megan to take the same initiative that I did. Megan was not ready to do that. That's when the irony struck. The children were returned to the guest room not because it made sense but because there were no other options. Once I left, the very thing I had advised before became acceptable. My previous room remained unoccupied for a time. There are no toys or setup, only a reminder. Sarah phoned me back a few weeks later. She sounded exhausted. "I'm not furious, just worn down." "I didn't think you'd actually leave," she told me. "I told you I would." "I thought you'd cool off," she said. "I thought you'd realize this was family." I remained quiet. She exhaled. "Things are harder now." "I know," I said. There was a prolonged pause. She did not apologize. She did not acknowledge wrongdoing. She just stated, "I wish you'd handled it differently." I responded once, and that was all. I dealt with it the only way I could. She did not argue. Following then, the texts slowed. Megan stopped reaching out completely. I heard from someone else that she was seeking for her own apartment. Sarah was overburdened, and the house was always tense. None of this shocked me. What surprised me was how calm my life had become. Work resumed after I was comfortable. I received payment for a project that I had fallen overdue on. I set up my equipment just how I wanted. Nobody touched it. No one commented. Nobody hovered. Some evenings, I worked late. Not because I had to, but because I could. The hush was not heavy. It was clean. I wasn't furious any longer. I wasn't rehashing debates in my mind. I didn't brace myself every time I heard footsteps. They assumed respect vanished when I departed. It did not. It was never present to begin with. My sister has always been manipulative and cruel, yet my parents favored her as their golden child. AITA for showing them her true nature. Lisa, my 18-year-old younger sister, is the real embodiment of evil on earth, in my opinion. I am a 23-year-old woman. I have attempted to persuade my parents to see the truth over the years, but they have never trusted me, until now. For background, I have always had a tense relationship with my parents, mostly because of Lisa. My mother lost a kid due to a miscarriage, which had a profound impact on her, which is why my parents cherish her. A few years later, Lisa was born, and was considered their miracle child, a ray of happiness and optimism that eased the anguish of their earlier loss. My parents made her the center of our family's existence by lavishing her with love and care. To be clear, when we were kids, I adored my younger sister. Simply put, I began to gradually realize that Lisa possessed a remarkable gift for manipulation that none of my relatives could match. She was skilled at playing the victim and knew how to make the scenario work in her favor. Our grandparents once gave me an old pocket watch for my birthday. I was overjoyed that it was a family heirloom. Lisa continued asking me to share it with her, obviously jealous. Since it was a present for me, I declined. She attempted to convince our parents, but they were unable to stop her because it came from our grandparents. Knowing that I was afraid of spiders, Lisa put a house spider inside my pillowcase that night. I shrieked as I woke up from my sleep to the terrifying feeling of a spider crawling across my flesh. Lisa looked astonished and sympathetic as my parents hurried in. She exhibited no remorse, and later, when we were alone, she confessed with a spooky smile that she had placed the spider there to teach me a lesson. I once invited my classmate Mark over to watch a movie since I was crushing on him. To impress him, I got dressed up. Lisa giggled and purposefully spilled juice over my dress when Mark got there. In an attempt to conceal my shame, I had to change. She then wouldn't leave us alone while the movie was playing and started telling Mark embarrassing anecdotes about me as a kid. Lisa grinned and told Mark he could do a lot better than me just as he was ready to go. Mark hurried out, feeling uneasy the whole time. I have warned my parents about Lisa's antics over the years, But they have consistently written it off as her being impressionable and immature. They believed that I was the family's troublemaker. After a while, I stopped whining. While I frequently felt alienated, Lisa continued to be their favorite. I put a lot of effort into my studies, was accepted to a reputable college, and left home. But Lisa always made it plain that she hated having me around when I returned home. She tampered with my possessions, disregarded me, and cut off my conversations with our parents. In an effort to get along, my parents encouraged us to avoid going home during breaks. Instead, my parents didn't appear to object because they believed I was being independent by spending time with my friends' families. Lisa opted for community college after graduating from high school since she lacked the grades necessary for college. As a result, she was never had to leave our parents' home. I currently work in San Francisco for a multinational company, and I truly love what I do. I don't often go home, although I do occasionally communicate with my folks. I have absolutely no communication with Lisa. Let's get to the story. My father suffered a heart attack that almost killed him. Thankfully, he miraculously survived and was taken to a hospital right away. I bought tickets and traveled back home to be there for them as soon as my mother called to inform me about it. In addition to prescribing a number of drugs, the physicians also encouraged my father to begin exercising. My father told me how fortunate he was to have been saved and said he wanted to spend more time with us as a family after being released. I chose to stay at our place for a few days since I could understand his perspective. It wasn't an issue because I have the ability to work remotely at my job. But I could see that my presence was really upsetting Lisa. Since we were both older now and I didn't want to argue after our dad's heart attack, I did my best to stay away from her. Since we hadn't gone anywhere together in a while, my father proposed that we all take a family vacation one morning over breakfast. Despite my initial misgivings, I consented since I understood how important it was to my dad. Lisa, on the other hand, was not happy about it but was forced to follow the plan. All of our travel and lodging arrangements were handled by my father. Since I sincerely wanted to spend time with my parents, I prepared my leave of absence in advance and told my coworkers not to get in touch with me during this period. However, I discovered that my airline ticket had been canceled when we got to the airport. My father asserted that he had purchased and paid for my ticket, and we exchanged perplexed glances. After more research, I discovered that the ticket bearing my name had been inexplicably canceled out of the four. I looked at Lisa as I stood there trying to make sense of what was happening. The devious smirk on her face was one I had seen so many before, the exact expression she would wear after successfully executing one of her cunning ploys. She was the one who had canceled my ticket, most likely from my father's computer, I knew at that same moment. She simply stood there grinning at me when I began to yell at her. Lisa had canceled my ticket since she didn't want me on the family trip in the first place, I told my dad. My mother didn't believe me at all and said, "Your sister would never do something like that." She also accused me of being envious of my younger sister and said that my ticket being canceled was just a random accident. In an attempt to defend it, my father also suggested that I shouldn't hold Lisa responsible and that it might have been an airline error. My parents' inability to believe that their cherished miracle child could be responsible for such dishonesty completely irritated me. But there was nothing I could do now. There were no other flights scheduled for that day, and my ticket had already been canceled. Even though I might be able to get a flight the next day, I didn't look forward to going home, finding a new flight, and going it alone. This was meant to be a family vacation, after all. Additionally, I was terrified of having to stay in the same room as Lisa while on the vacation. Although I had thought she had changed over the years, I couldn't help but wonder what other plans she might have to ruin my vacation if she was responsible for canceling my plane ticket. At first, my father was apprehensive, saying they might all return home and arrange another vacation at a later time. But then he began to talk about how long it had been since he had taken a holiday. According to my mother, I frequently travel for work and wouldn't miss anything if I didn't go. I felt upset by their remarks because they seemed to be gently pressuring me to let them depart without me. They immediately agreed when I informed them they might stay on vacation if they so desired. I was disappointed that they didn't care if I joined them or not, even though I didn't want the money I had paid for the tickets and accommodations to be wasted. It became evident that they had no problem traveling as a family of 3 for the family holiday. Thus, I found myself standing by myself at the airport as my parents and Lisa left for their much-awaited journey. Instead of spending a lonely day at our family home, I made the decision to go back to my home in San Francisco. I made an effort to put the experience behind me and concentrated on making the most of the remainder of my leave. I made the most of my break by reading, reconnecting with old acquaintances, and taking a solo vacay. At times during the trip, my parents would video call me to express how much they were having fun without me. It seemed as though my absence had no bearing whatsoever on their trip. I wasn't devastated that I missed the trip, but I couldn't get rid of the sense of alienation. It was just another example of the favoritism that had always pervaded our family. But it came as a surprise when I wished for my parents to finally see Lisa for who she really was. My mother had left me multiple missed calls when I woke up a few days into their vacation. I called her back right away since I was worried that my father's health would suddenly deteriorate. Fortunately, she answered, although her voice was very upset. She told me that something really upsetting had happened when I asked whether everything was well. It seems that my father's vital cardiac meds were running out every day, and my parents had observed this. This was concerning since, given his precarious condition, my father could not afford to skip his medication. They were unsure if they could locate substitutes because they were in a strange nation. They looked everywhere in their room but couldn't find anything. Then, while using Lisa's hotel room to borrow sunscreen, my mother found all the missing pills hidden on Lisa's bedside table. It was a terrifying revelation. At last, my parents came to the realization that their cherished miracle child had been purposefully endangering and threatening my father's health. When my mother inquired as to whether they ought to speak with Lisa, her voice wavered. I suggested that they hold off until they got home in order to collect their ideas and supporting documentation. It would be pointless to confront Lisa right away because she was a skilled manipulator and would probably make up excuses. But that night, something unexpected occurred. Despite my caution, my parents must have gone up to Lisa. My father called me late at night and told me that Lisa was in jail. His voice was shaking. I was taken aback. He described how Lisa threw a complete fit when they asked her about the drugs. She hurled things, yelled obscenities, and mostly attacked my father, saying he had purchased a ticket for me when he ought never to have permitted me to join them on their family trip. Lisa promised my parents that she would give them a lesson they would never forget if they remained in my company. She snapped, and things quickly got out of hand until someone at the hotel phoned the police. Lisa was taken into custody after she refused to calm down and insulted the officers when they arrived. After a few hours, Lisa was freed, but at that point, my parents were powerless. My parents sought to postpone their flight since they were desperate to get home. But they found that their wallets and passports were gone. It turned out that they were stranded in a distant nation because Lisa had either concealed or thrown away their passports. My parents started to see Lisa for who she truly was for the first time. Having always stood up for Lisa, my mother was suddenly overcome, astonished, and upset at the discovery of her angelic daughter's true identity. They lacked the funds and paperwork to take a plane back, so she called me and begged for assistance. I informed her that they needed to locate their passports before I could transfer funds via Western Union. I was sure Lisa hadn't thrown them away. At last, my parents began to see that I had been telling the truth about Lisa's shenanigans the entire time. Despite not include me in the trip, they expressed regret for their actions and gratitude for my assistance. It was difficult to overlook the years of partiality that had cost me their love, even if I wanted to forgive them. Update 1. My parents contacted with information every day, and I became more and more nervous. My parents threatened to contact the police once more if Lisa didn't return their passports once she was released from jail. Lisa had no choice except to show where she had concealed them. My parents confronted Lisa when they got home and instructed her to gather her things and go. They had finally realized the truth about her destructive and deceptive behavior, and they had finally reached their breaking point. They were concerned that Lisa might steal my father's prescription drugs and jeopardize his health once more. Another yelling match resulted from this altercation. Lisa vented her rage and contempt by making false accusations about my parents. She stated that she felt pushed to the brink when they invited me on the trip and that she didn't want to share them with anybody else. Lisa asserted that she was more than enough for them both and insisted that they disown me. When my parents attempted to reason with her, she continued to accuse them. Lisa became so enraged and desperate that she threatened to tell everyone that they had abused and neglected her when she was a youngster. She intensified her threats, saying that if they persisted in demanding that she leave, she would go to the police and make false allegations against them. My parents were really concerned by these threats since they are well-respected physicians in the neighborhood and such accusations could damage their reputation. Since then, Lisa has persisted in making my parents' lives challenging. Lisa became enraged and began smashing things when she found out they were talking to me on a regular basis. To make matters worse, she continues taking my parents' car keys and concealing them, which makes it difficult for them to get to work each day. My mother phoned me crying just tonight following yet another unfortunate event. Lisa wanted my mother to prepare dinner for her, so she threw a fit and yelled. Lisa went on a frenzy and broke furniture all around the home when my mother refused, claiming she was exhausted from work. Then, in order to keep our parents from sleeping, she withdrew to her room and turned up the music. My parents are suffering greatly emotionally and mentally as a result of the situation, which is getting worse. Although I had hoped they would realize Lisa's true character, I now fear she could actually endanger them. I can't even go back home because I could set her off even more, which would result in more violent altercations. I'm making every effort to get my parents to seek legal advice in order to resolve this recurring issue once and for all. The greatest option to safeguard my parents and bring harmony back to our family seems to be through the legal system. Update 2. As many of you anticipated, Lisa has been arrested. This was an unavoidable result of her growing shenanigans. She attacked our parents with a knife one evening following a furious dispute. They had to call the police because they were so terrified. Lisa was quickly arrested by officers on assault allegations. My parents felt it was time to look for a long-term solution while Lisa was in custody. They sought advice from a lawyer, who helped them navigate the court system in order to remove Lisa from their house. Lisa had to vacate, according to a legal eviction notice they issued. Even if they found this decision difficult, it was essential to protect them. My parents only wanted her out of their house and didn't want to file any more charges. They gave her a written notice outlining all the legal specifics of why and when she had to leave, and they also bailed her out of jail. After that, they went to court with their attorney to start the eviction procedure, which involved suing Lisa. My parents were devastated by this development and felt terrible remorse for bringing their own daughter to court. But they knew there was nothing else they could do. After a while, the court formally ordered Lisa to vacate the house. They would be legally allowed to take her off the property if she didn't go voluntarily. By next week, Lisa should be gone. Now that they've taken a step toward taking back their house and their tranquility, my folks are finally beginning to exhale with relief. Although it has been a difficult trip, they are optimistic that after Lisa leaves, things will get better. Throughout this trauma, I have maintained a tight relationship with them, and I intend to take them to San Francisco for a few weeks. After everything they've been through, it will provide them with a much-needed respite and an opportunity to unwind. I'm excited to get to know them better and help them in any way that I can. Update 3. Reading through the hundreds of comments that have been left on my post has taken some time. Many of you recommended that we think about having Lisa assessed to see if there may be a mental health problem at work. The problem is that we cannot make Lisa go for a checkup against her will because she is an adult. We don't want to push her and add to the already complex scenario because of her violent outbursts. My parents went down to San Francisco to be with me for a few days, as I mentioned in my previous report. After everything they had been through in the past few months, they wanted a break. My parents started talking to me yesterday evening as we sat around the dining table in my comfortable apartment. Their words were filled with remorse and humility. They pleaded for my forgiveness, acknowledging that they had been unaware of Lisa's actual character for so long. My father apologized for not paying attention to my earlier warnings. He acknowledged that they were blind to the reality behind Lisa's endearing facade and never anticipated her to turn out this way. My mother agreed with my father and recognized the seriousness of their error in ignoring my worries about Lisa's actions throughout the years. As she expressed the anguish of learning how they had let me down by preferring Lisa, her voice faltered. I told them how much I valued their initiative in asking for my pardon. I talked about a number of distressing memories of the years of suffering I went through because of Lisa's behavior. When my parents heard what I had gone through on my own, they were completely taken aback and appalled. They apologized for the loneliness I had inside my own family and acknowledged the suffering I had endured. Since they never anticipated being pregnant with Lisa and always thought of her as their miracle child, my parents described how their partiality for her had influenced their decisions. Their voices were earnest as they pleaded for my pardon for all those years. I had always desired their recognition, therefore it was a moment of mixed emotions for me. It was a turning point that gave our family dynamic much-needed honesty and clarity, even though it might not have been the best approach to patch things up. We were now recognizing the problems that had afflicted our family for the first time in years. We all decided to work through this together after I informed them that it would take some time to regain their trust. As of right now, I want to enjoy every moment of my family's visit to me during the next few days. Update 4. My parents and I spent more time together as the days went by, taking leisurely dinners, visiting the lively streets of San Francisco, and just enjoying one another's company. Rebuilding the relationships that had been damaged by years of partiality and denial has been quite the struggle. I realized that their choice to turn to me for comfort was motivated by more than simply putting physical distance between them and Lisa. It was also a desire to reunite the family they had nearly lost. Like them, I needed a new beginning. Since then, my parents and I have spoken about what to do with Lisa. At the moment, she is lodging at a friend's house. Despite the chaos she has brought into our life, we cannot just leave her. Even if their daughter's conduct have been terrible, my parents feel a strong sense of duty to her as parents. We've accepted the possibility that her actions could point to more serious problems than simple purposeful mischief. To learn more about her situation, we intend to investigate the possibility of a mental health evaluation. Since Lisa is an adult, we are unable to coerce her into undergoing such an evaluation. Instead, we must devise a strategy to motivate her to freely seek assistance. When they return home, my parents want to get in touch with Lisa to see if she's willing to have a conversation. She still has a lot of anger toward me, therefore I don't want to get in touch with her because I don't want to make things worse for her mental health. Given her history of violence and hostility, I have urged my parents to meet her in a public setting to make her learn to regulate her emotions. We want Lisa to understand our point of view and, above all, to understand how much we care and love her. This is about resolving the problems that have caused tension in our relationships as a family, not about placing blame. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I sued my parents and received a $1,200,000 settlement for years of favoritism toward my older sister, which deeply affected my life. I sued my parents for manipulating my golden sister and received a settlement of $1,200,000. Growing up, I always felt like I lived in the shadow of my older sister, Elizabeth. She was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I was old enough to notice, it was clear she was the star of our family. My parents, John and Margaret, were well off and well respected in our community. My father ran a thriving real estate business, and my mother, a retired concert pianist, devoted her time to social events and managing our home. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, but inside, it was a different story. Elizabeth was their golden child, and everything about her life reflected that. She was brilliant, charismatic, and excelled at everything she tried, whether it was academics, sports, or music. She outshone everyone, including me. My parents adored her, showering her with praise and attention. Every milestone she reached was celebrated like a major event, complete with elaborate parties and expensive gifts. I was there too, of course, but more as a background character. My own accomplishments, modest as they were, barely registered. It wasn't that I wasn't trying. I did well enough in school and stayed out of trouble, but I didn't shine like Elizabeth. The difference in how we were treated became painfully clear over the years. One Christmas stands out in my mind. I was 8, and Elizabeth was 11. My parents had gone all out with the presents that year. The living room was piled high with gifts, but the centerpiece was a grand piano gleaming under the Christmas lights. Elizabeth had been begging for it for months, and my mother, who still missed her own days as a pianist, had finally caved. They were ecstatic as they unveiled it, going on and on about how Elizabeth would carry on the family tradition. When it was my turn, my dad handed me a small box. Inside was a sketch pad and a set of crayons. "We thought you might like to draw," he said with a smile. I tried to act grateful, but the message was clear. Elizabeth was the star, and I was just there. Things didn't improve as we got older. In school, Elizabeth continued to dominate. She was class president, captain of the cheerleading squad, and eventually valedictorian. Everyone loved her. Teachers sang her praises, and her peers either idolized her or envied her. Meanwhile, I struggled to find my place. I had a small group of friends, nerdy kids like me who loved video games and comic books, but I was invisible to most of the school. I wasn't bullied exactly, but I wasn't noticed either. One of the most humiliating moments of my childhood happened during a school talent show. I had decided to perform a magic act, something I'd been practicing for weeks. Elizabeth was also in the show, playing a piano piece she had mastered in a matter of days. She went first, and of course, the audience went wild. Her performance was flawless, and she got a standing ovation. Then it was my turn. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped one of my props. A few kids in the audience laughed, and I could feel my face burning. I stumbled through the rest of my act, desperate to just get it over with. Afterward, my parents gave me a half-hearted good job, but their attention quickly shifted back to Elizabeth, who was basking in her glory. Elizabeth wasn't deliberately cruel, at least not usually. After the talent show, she came up to me with that insufferable smile of hers and said, "You were great, Jackson. It's so brave of you to try." Her words stung, not because they were mean, but because they felt so condescending. I hated that I cared so much about her opinion. As we moved into our teenage years, favoritism became impossible to ignore. My parents poured resources into Elizabeth's future, paying for private tutors, expensive summer programs, and any extracurricular activities she showed interest in. I got none of that. When I asked if I could take art classes, my dad shrugged and said, "Maybe next year." A promise that never materialized. Elizabeth's charm extended to the rest of the family as well. Our relatives adored her. Family gatherings turned into endless cycles of Elizabeth is so talented, and Elizabeth is going to do great things. I often wondered if they even remembered my name. At one Thanksgiving dinner, my aunt turned to me and said, "You must be so proud of your sister." I nodded, biting back the urge to say, "And what about me?" Even as I tried to carve out a path for myself, it felt like Elizabeth was always one step ahead, effortlessly overshadowing me. She didn't just succeed, she excelled. And she did it with an ease that made my own struggles seem pitiful in comparison. I began to resent her, not just for how she was treated, but for how she made me feel about myself. My parents' favoritism wasn't just about praise or attention, it had real consequences. When Elizabeth turned 16, my dad surprised her with a brand new car, a sleek red convertible. She squealed with delight, hugging him and gushing about how it was the best day of her life. 2 years later, when I turned 16, I got the keys to our old family sedan, a beat-up station wagon with a busted radio and a sagging roofliner. "It's still a good car," my dad said, as if that made it any less humiliating. Elizabeth went off to an Ivy League university, her tuition fully covered by my parents, who couldn't stop bragging about their brilliant daughter. I, on the other hand, ended up at a state school, working part-time jobs to cover what my partial scholarship didn't. My parents didn't even bother to visit when I moved into my dorm. They were too busy helping Elizabeth set up her new apartment near campus. By the time I graduated, the resentment I felt toward Elizabeth and my parents had hardened into something deeper. I knew it wasn't healthy, but I couldn't help it. Every time I saw her with her perfect life and her endless string of successes, it felt like a reminder of everything I wasn't. The first time Elizabeth referred to me as her backup plan, it was meant as a joke, or at least that's how she sold it. It was during one of those rare family dinners where everyone pretended we were closer than we really were. Elizabeth was home for the weekend with her fiancé, Ryan, a stockbroker with the personality of a cardboard box but a bank account big enough to make my parents fawn over him. We were sitting around the dining table, halfway through dessert, when Elizabeth casually leaned back in her chair and said, "Well, if Ryan ever dumps me, at least I know Jackson will always be single and available." The room erupted into laughter, but I just sat there, stunned. It wasn't the kind of joke you expect to hear from your sister, especially not in front of your fiancé, Amelia, who had been sitting quietly beside me. Amelia gave me a small, uncomfortable smile, the kind that said she was trying not to make a scene but didn't find it funny either. Later that night, as we were driving home, Amelia finally said, "Does she always talk to you like that?" Her tone was neutral, but I could tell she was bothered. "Elizabeth is Elizabeth," I replied, trying to brush it off. "She thinks she's being funny." Amelia didn't push it further, but I could see the question lingering in her eyes. She didn't need to say it out loud. I was already asking myself the same thing. Over the next few months, Elizabeth's jokes became a recurring theme. She'd bring it up at the most inappropriate times, always with that same smug smile, as if she enjoyed watching me squirm. At first, I tried to laugh it off, but it was hard not to take it personally. It didn't help that Ryan found it hilarious. Hey, at least you've got a backup plan, buddy," he said once, clapping me on the shoulder. I wanted to punch him in his perfectly chiseled face. Amelia, however, wasn't amused. During one family barbecue, Elizabeth made her usual comment, something along the lines of, "Don't get too comfortable, Ryan. Jackson's been waiting in the wings his whole life." This time, Amelia didn't hold back. "That's incredibly disrespectful," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Jackson isn't anyone's backup plan." The laughter stopped. Elizabeth's face froze for a moment, then twisted into a patronizing smile. "Oh, come on, Amelia, it's just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." "I'm not sure why you think that's funny," Amelia shot back. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said anything to Elizabeth. They never did. The drive home that night was silent. I could tell Amelia was furious, but she waited until we were in the privacy of our apartment to let it out. "You need to stand up to her, Jackson," she said, pacing the living room. "This isn't okay. She's treating you like a doormat, and you're letting her." "I know," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "But what am I supposed to do? She's always been like this. If I say anything, it'll just make things worse." "It's already worse," Amelia snapped. "She's undermining you in front of everyone, and your parents just sit there like it's normal." "It's not normal, Jackson. It's toxic." Amelia was right, of course, but knowing that didn't make it any easier. Confronting Elizabeth felt impossible. She was so good at twisting words and making herself look like the victim. I'd seen her do it 100 times before. Things reached a boiling point a few weeks later at another family gathering. This time, it was my parents' anniversary party, a lavish affair at a fancy restaurant. Elizabeth, as usual, was the center of attention, holding court with Ryan at her side. Amelia and I tried to stay in the background, but Elizabeth wouldn't let us. Halfway through the evening, she raised her glass and said, "Let's toast to my amazing little brother Jackson. He's always been there for me, and I know he always will be, my reliable backup plan." The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me, waiting to see how I'd react. Amelia's hand tightened on my arm, a silent plea for me to say something. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stand up. "Elizabeth," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to sit here and let you treat me like a joke anymore." The words hung in the air like a challenge. For a moment, Elizabeth looked genuinely surprised, but then her expression hardened. "Wow, Jackson," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Someone's a little sensitive tonight." "I'm not sensitive," I shot back. "I'm tired. Tired of you belittling me every chance you get. It's not funny, and it's not okay." To my surprise, a few people at the table nodded in agreement. Even Ryan looked uncomfortable, but my parents predictably tried to smooth things over. "Let's not ruin the evening," my mom said, her voice tight. "Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it." "Yes, she did," I replied. "And you've let her get away with it for years." That was the moment I realized just how deep the dysfunction ran. My parents weren't going to change. Elizabeth wasn't going to change. The only thing I could change was how I responded to it. Amelia was proud of me for standing up to Elizabeth, but the fallout wasn't pretty. Elizabeth stopped speaking to me for weeks, which honestly felt more like a blessing than a punishment. My parents tried to guilt-trip me into apologizing, saying I'd overreacted and ruined the party, but I didn't budge. For the first time in my life, I put my own feelings above keeping the peace, and it felt liberating. Of course, Elizabeth didn't stay quiet for long. When she finally did reach out, it was under the guise of clearing the air, but it quickly became clear she had no intention of apologizing. Instead, she doubled down, claiming I had misinterpreted her jokes and accusing Amelia of turning me against her. That conversation ended with me hanging up the phone, something I'd never dared to do before. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt monumental. For the first time, I wasn't just Elizabeth's overshadowed little brother. I was my own person, and I wasn't going to let her or anyone else treat me like anything less. The family dinner started like any other. Tense, formal, and pretending to be something it wasn't. My parents had invited us all over for a special evening, a phrase that always made me suspicious. Elizabeth arrived late, as usual, sweeping into the room with Ryan at her side and an air of self-importance that was impossible to ignore. Amelia and I were already seated, making polite conversation with my parents, John and Margaret, and a few extended family members. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and my cousin Claire, who always seemed like she wanted to be anywhere but with us. Elizabeth barely glanced at me as she made her grand entrance, throwing her arms around my mother and exclaiming, "You look amazing, Mom! Did you lose weight?" Her charm was always dialed to maximum in these settings, and my parents lapped it up like thirsty dogs. Ryan followed behind, carrying a bottle of wine that he presented to my father like it was a peace offering. "Thought this might pair well with dinner," he said, his smile as practiced as Elizabeth's. Amelia, seated beside me, squeezed my hand under the table. She hated these dinners as much as I did, but she came anyway, trying to be supportive. I appreciated her more than I could say, especially on nights like this. The meal started without much drama, the conversation staying light and focused on Elizabeth's latest achievements. She had recently been promoted at work and couldn't stop talking about how her boss had personally requested her for a high-profile project. My parents hung on her every word, nodding and smiling like proud parents at a recital. "And what about you, Jackson?" Elizabeth said suddenly, turning her attention to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What have you been up to?" The question was a trap. It always was. She didn't actually care about the answer. It was just a way to remind everyone that whatever I said would pale in comparison to her latest triumph. "Work's been good," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Busy, but good." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "That's it? No big promotions? No exciting news?" "I'm happy with where I am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Amelia's grip on my hand tightened. Elizabeth smirked and leaned back in her chair. "Well, as long as you're happy, I guess that's what matters." The comment stung, but I let it slide. I had learned over the years that confronting Elizabeth in front of our parents was a losing battle. They always took her side, no matter what. But tonight, I wasn't sure I could keep biting my tongue. The turning point came during dessert. My mother had baked her famous apple pie, a recipe she'd passed down from her grandmother. The conversation had shifted to family traditions, and Elizabeth naturally had taken center stage. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with fake nostalgia. "It's funny how family dynamics change over time. I mean, I'll always be the overachiever, and Jackson will always be." She trailed off, waving her fork in my direction. "Elizabeth," Amelia said sharply, breaking the awkward silence that followed. "That's enough." Elizabeth blinked, feigning innocence. "What?" "I'm just saying we all have our roles. Jackson's always been the quiet one, the dependable one. My backup plan, as I like to call him." She laughed as if that made it better. Something inside me snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Do you have any idea how offensive that is?" I said, my voice louder than I intended. "You've been making these comments for years, and I've had enough. I'm not your backup plan, Elizabeth. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like this." The room went dead silent. My father set down his fork, his expression darkening. My mother looked as though I had just slapped her. Elizabeth, meanwhile, looked more amused than anything else. "Oh, come on, Jackson," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're overreacting. It's a joke." "It's not a joke," I shot back. "It's degrading, and you know it. You use these jokes to belittle me and make yourself feel superior." My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "That's enough, Jackson. Sit down." I turned to him, incredulous. "Are you serious? She's been insulting me for years, and you've never said a word. But the moment I stand up for myself, I'm the problem?" "Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it," my mother said, her voice tight. "You're making a scene over nothing." "Nothing?" I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't nothing. She's been undermining me my whole life, and you've let her. You've encouraged it." "Jackson," my father said, his tone warning. "You're out of line." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Out of line? Do you even hear yourselves? You've spent my entire life making me feel like I don't matter, like I'll never be good enough compared to her. And now, when I finally speak up, you're telling me to shut up and take it?" Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like this was some kind of soap opera she was enjoying. "Honestly, Jackson," she said, "you're being so dramatic. If you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you should work on your self-esteem." Amelia stood up then, her face red with anger. "You're unbelievable," she said, glaring at Elizabeth. "You talk about Jackson like he's some second-rate backup, but he's twice the person you'll ever be. And you," she added, turning to my parents, "should be ashamed of yourselves for enabling this." My mother gasped, as if Amelia had just insulted the Queen. "How dare you speak to us like that? How dare you treat your son like this?" Amelia shot back. "You don't even see how toxic this family dynamic is, do you?" The argument escalated from there, voices overlapping as years of resentment and unspoken grievances spilled out into the open. I don't know how long it went on, but by the time it was over, I felt drained, as if I'd run a marathon. "I'm happy with where I am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Amelia's grip on my hand tightened. Elizabeth smirked and leaned back in her chair. "Well, as long as you're happy, I guess that's what matters." The comment stung, but I let it slide. I had learned over the years that confronting Elizabeth in front of our parents was a losing battle. They always took her side, no matter what. But tonight, I wasn't sure I could keep biting my tongue. The turning point came during dessert. My mother had baked her famous apple pie, a recipe she'd passed down from her grandmother. The conversation had shifted to family traditions, and Elizabeth naturally had taken center stage. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with fake nostalgia. "It's funny how family dynamics change over time. I mean, I'll always be the overachiever, and Jackson will always be." She trailed off, waving her fork in my direction. "Elizabeth," Amelia said sharply, breaking the awkward silence that followed. "That's enough." Elizabeth blinked, feigning innocence. "What?" "I'm just saying we all have our roles. Jackson's always been the quiet one, the dependable one. My backup plan, as I like to call him." She laughed as if that made it better. Something inside me snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Do you have any idea how offensive that is?" I said, my voice louder than I intended. "You've been making these comments for years, and I've had enough. I'm not your backup plan, Elizabeth. I'm not your safety net, And I'm not going to let you keep treating me like this. The room went dead silent. My father set down his fork, his expression darkening. My mother looked as though I had just slapped her. Elizabeth, meanwhile, looked more amused than anything else. "Oh, come on, Jackson," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're overreacting. It's a joke." "It's not a joke," I shot back. "It's degrading, and you know it. You use these jokes to belittle me and make yourself feel superior." My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "That's enough, Jackson. Sit down." I turned to him, incredulous. "Are you serious? She's been insulting me for years, and you've never said a word. But the moment I stand up for myself, I'm the problem?" "Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it," my mother said, her voice tight. "You're making a scene over nothing." "Nothing?" I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't nothing. She's been undermining me my whole life, and you've let her. You've encouraged it." "Jackson," my father said, his tone warning. "You're out of line." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Out of line? Do you even hear yourselves? You've spent my entire life making me feel like I don't matter, like I'll never be good enough compared to her. And now, when I finally speak up, you're telling me to shut up and take it?" Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like this was some kind of soap opera she was enjoying. "Honestly, Jackson," she said, "you're being so dramatic. If you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you should work on your self-esteem." Amelia stood up then, her face red with anger. "You're unbelievable," she said, glaring at Elizabeth. "You talk about Jackson like he's some second-rate backup, but he's twice the person you'll ever be. And you," she added, turning to my parents, "should be ashamed of yourselves for enabling this." My mother gasped, as if Amelia had just insulted the Queen. "How dare you speak to us like that? How dare you treat your son like this?" Amelia shot back. "You don't even see how toxic this family dynamic is, do you?" The argument escalated from there, voices overlapping as years of resentment and unspoken grievances spilled out into the open. I don't know how long it went on, but by the time it was over, I felt drained, as if I'd run a marathon. My parents didn't speak to me as Amelia and I gathered our things and left. Elizabeth, of course, had the last word. "Well, I guess some people just can't handle the truth," she said with a smirk as we walked out the door. In the car, Amelia reached over and took my hand. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." I nodded, though I didn't feel proud. I felt exhausted, angry, and deeply hurt. But for the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself, and that had to count for something. The drive home from that disastrous dinner was silent for a while, the only sound coming from the hum of the engine. Amelia sat beside me, her arms crossed tightly, her face a storm of emotions. I could feel the anger radiating off her, but beneath it, there was something else, concern for me. Finally, she broke the silence. "You can't keep doing this, Jackson." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "I know." "No," she said, her voice firmer now. "I don't think you do. Tonight wasn't just another bad dinner, it was a wake-up call. Your family doesn't respect you. They don't care about your feelings, and they never will unless you set boundaries." She was right, of course, but the thought of distancing myself from my family felt like tearing off a piece of myself. As toxic as they were still my parents, still my sister. The idea of walking away felt both terrifying and freeing. We got home, and as I dropped my keys on the counter, Amelia turned to me, her eyes softening. "You deserve better than this, Jackson. You've worked hard for everything you have, and you can't let them keep taking from you, emotionally or otherwise." That last part hit me like a brick. Amelia had brought up concerns about my family's financial ties to me before, especially after I started making a decent living. My parents had a habit of borrowing money that was never repaid, and Elizabeth, ever the opportunist, had hinted more than once about how I could help her out if she and Ryan ever hit a rough patch. I had always brushed it off, thinking it was just family dynamics, but now it felt like another layer of manipulation. "I need to think about this," I said finally, my voice heavy. Amelia nodded. "Take your time, but don't let them guilt you into staying in this cycle." The next day, I called my friend and coworker Adam. Adam was a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who had helped me out with a few contracts at work. If anyone could give me sound advice, it was him. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. As I laid out the situation, Adam listened intently, his expression unreadable. "First off," he said when I finished, "you need to protect yourself. If your family has access to any of your accounts, cut that off immediately. And if you're serious about setting boundaries, you might need to consider more than just limiting contact. You might need to get legal protection." Legal protection? I asked, my stomach sinking. Adam nodded. Look, I'm not saying they're going to sue you or anything, but if your parents or sister feel entitled to your money or anything else, you need to make sure they can't take advantage of you. That means reviewing your assets, setting up trusts if necessary, and maybe even writing a formal letter making your boundaries clear. The thought of it all made my head spin, but I knew he was right. My family had shown time and time again that they didn't respect me, and if I didn't take action, I'd only have myself to blame when things got worse. Over the next few weeks, I began the process of disentangling myself from my family's financial reach. I closed joint accounts my parents had access to, updated the beneficiaries on my insurance policies, and even had Adam draft a will that explicitly stated how my assets would be handled. It felt surreal, like I was preparing for some kind of war, but it was also empowering. Amelia was my rock through it all. She encouraged me every step of the way, reminding me that I wasn't doing this out of spite but to protect myself. This isn't about hurting them, she said one night as we reviewed the documents Adam had prepared. It's about making sure they can't hurt you anymore. The real test came when my parents called a week later. My mother's voice was sugary sweet as she asked if I'd like to come over for dinner to smooth things over. I could hear Elizabeth in the background, laughing about something with Ryan. The image of them sitting there, planning their next subtle dig at my expense, made my stomach turn. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I think it's best if I take some time away from the family for now. There was a pause, and then her tone shifted. Jackson, don't be ridiculous, we're family. We need to stick together. Family doesn't mean I have to tolerate being disrespected, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. I need to do this for my own well-being. She sighed heavily, the kind of sigh that was meant to convey disappointment. Fine, if that's how you feel. It wasn't long before the guilt tripping began. Over the next few days, I received a string of messages from both my parents and Elizabeth. My dad kept it short and gruff, accusing me of overreacting and telling me to man up. Elizabeth, predictably, made it all about herself, sending texts like, I can't believe you'd cut us off like this after everything I've done for you. But the one that hit the hardest was from my mother. I just want you to know how much this is hurting us. We've always loved you, Jackson, even if you can't see it. I almost caved after that one. Almost. But Amelia was there, reminding me of why I had made this decision in the first place. Love doesn't look like manipulation, she said gently. And if they really love you, they'll respect your need for space. As time went on, the messages tapered off. My parents stopped calling, and Elizabeth moved on to other targets for her attention. It was a strange feeling, being free from their constant judgment and demands. Lonely at times, yes, but also liberating. I focused on my work, my relationship with Amelia, and rebuilding my sense of self-worth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in Elizabeth's shadow or bending over backward to please my parents. I was just me, and it felt good. But even as I started to heal, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. My family wasn't the type to let things go quietly, and I had a sinking suspicion that my decision to set boundaries would come with consequences I hadn't yet anticipated. The first sign that things were escalating came in the form of a voicemail from my mother. It was late on a Tuesday night when I saw her name flash on my phone screen. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to dive back into the family drama just yet, but the message she left was hard to ignore. Jackson, she began, her tone clipped and formal, the kind she used when she was holding back anger. Your father and I have been talking, and we feel it's time to discuss the family inheritance. There are some things you need to understand about how we've planned for the future. Call me back as soon as you can. Inheritance. The word sent a chill down my spine. I'd always suspected my parents would use it as a tool to manipulate me, and now it seemed that suspicion was coming true. I replayed the voicemail for Amelia later that evening, pacing the living room as I spoke. This is them trying to reel me back in, I said, frustration bubbling under the surface. They can't stand that I've set boundaries, so now they're dangling the inheritance in front of me like a carrot on a stick. Amelia frowned, her arms crossed as she leaned against the kitchen counter. You don't even care about the inheritance, do you? Not really, I admitted. But it's the principle of it. They're trying to control me again, and I'm not sure how to handle it. Don't play their game, she said firmly. If you call her back, they'll just use it as an opportunity to guilt trip you. Stick to your boundaries. I knew she was right, but the thought of ignoring the call entirely felt wrong. So the next morning, I texted my mother instead. I got your message. I'm not interested in discussing inheritance right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Her response came almost immediately. That's not how this works, Jackson. This is a family matter, and you need to be part of the conversation. I didn't reply. Over the next few days, the messages continued. My father chimed in as well, sending curt texts about responsibility and respect for the family legacy. I tried to ignore them, but it was exhausting, like fighting a battle I hadn't signed up for. Then, out of nowhere, Elizabeth entered the fray. She showed up at my office unannounced, striding in like she owned the place. My coworkers exchanged awkward glances as she swept past them to my desk. "Jackson," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We need to talk." I gestured for her to follow me into the conference room, not wanting to make a scene. Once the door was closed, I turned to her, arms crossed. "What are you doing here, Elizabeth?" She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made my stomach churn. "I'm here because Mom and Dad are worried about you. They say you're refusing to discuss the inheritance." "I'm not refusing," I said evenly. "I'm just not interested right now." "Well, you should be," she said, her tone sharpening. "This isn't just about you, Jackson. It's about the entire family. Mom and Dad have worked hard to build this, and you're acting like a spoiled child by ignoring them." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure. "Elizabeth, if you come here to lecture me, you can leave. I've made my decision." Her smile faltered, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something behind her eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration? But she recovered quickly. "Fine," she said, turning to leave. "But don't say I didn't warn you when this all blows up in your face." The encounter left me rattled. Elizabeth's sudden involvement felt calculated, like she was trying to position herself as the savior of the family while painting me as the black sheep. And it wasn't long before I found out just how far she was willing to go. A few weeks later, I got a call from Adam, my lawyer friend. "Jackson," he said, his voice urgent. "I found something you need to see." He sent me an email with an attachment, a financial statement linked to a bank account in Elizabeth's name. The balance was staggering, over $600,000. But what caught my attention was the list of deposits, all marked as transfers from my parents. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. "This can't be real," I muttered. "It's real," Adam said. I double-checked. "Your parents have been funneling money into this account for years, probably under the guise of helping her with expenses." "Why would they do this?" I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind. Elizabeth was their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Of course they'd bankroll her life while leaving me to fend for myself. "You need to confront them about this," Adam said. "And you might want to consider taking legal action to protect yourself. This kind of favoritism could have serious implications for the inheritance or anything else they might try to manipulate you with." The thought of confronting my parents or Elizabeth about this made my stomach turn, but I knew Adam was right. I couldn't let this go unchecked. That weekend, I invited my parents over to my apartment. Amelia was there for support, her presence a steadying force as I prepared for what I knew would be an explosive conversation. When my parents arrived, they were all smiles, as if nothing was wrong. But their expressions changed the moment I brought up the bank account. "I know about the money you've been giving Elizabeth," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Over $600,000. Care to explain?" My mother's face turned pale, while my father's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business," he said gruffly. "It is my business," I shot back. "Because it's a blatant example of how you've always favored her over me. And now you're trying to use the inheritance to manipulate me. I'm done with it." My mother tried to placate me, her voice trembling. "Jackson, we did what we thought was best. Elizabeth needed help." "She needed help?" I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "While I've been working my ass off to make ends meet, you've been handing her hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do you even hear how ridiculous that sounds?" The argument escalated from there, voices rising as years of resentment came to the surface. My father accused me of being ungrateful, while my mother pleaded for me to see reason. But I wasn't backing down. "You've always put Elizabeth first," I said, my voice shaking. "And I'm done pretending that's okay. If you want to continue this dynamic, fine. But I won't be part of it anymore." The conversation ended with my parents storming out, my mother in tears and my father muttering something about family loyalty. Amelia hugged me tightly as the door closed behind them, her support the only thing keeping me grounded. For the first time, I felt like I had truly taken a stand. It wasn't easy, and I knew there would be fallout, but I also knew it was the only way to reclaim my life. The decision to take legal action against my parents wasn't one I made lightly. For weeks after discovering Elizabeth's secret bank account, I wrestled with the implications of what it meant to sue my own family. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about the money. It was about standing up for myself and finally breaking free from the toxic grip my family had on me. Amelia supported me from the beginning, though she made it clear it was my decision to make. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," she said one night as we sat on the couch, the glow of the TV illuminating her determined expression. "But if you go through with this, you need to be prepared for how ugly it might get." She wasn't wrong. I knew my parents wouldn't take this lying down, and Elizabeth would undoubtedly make it her mission to turn the situation to her advantage. But I also knew I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. The first step was consulting with Adam, my lawyer friend. He recommended bringing in a specialist, someone with experience in family financial disputes. That's how I met Lauren Green, a sharp and no-nonsense attorney who had a reputation for handling complex cases with precision. Lauren didn't sugarcoat anything during our first meeting. "This is going to be messy," she said, her piercing blue eyes locked on mine. "But based on what you've told me and the evidence you've provided, you have a solid case. If we can prove financial manipulation and favoritism that's impacted your inheritance or financial stability, we can argue for compensation." We began building the case, combing through years of financial records, emails, and text messages. Adam helped me track down additional documentation, including statements from family members who had witnessed the blatant favoritism over the years. My cousin Claire, who had always been quietly supportive, agreed to testify. "I've seen how they treat you, Jackson," she said over the phone. "It's not right, and it's about time someone called them out on it." The hardest part was revisiting all the moments that had led to this point. Every slight, every insult, every time I was made to feel like I wasn't enough, it all came rushing back as I pieced together the timeline of my family's dysfunction. But with each new piece of evidence, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about setting a precedent, about showing that people couldn't get away with treating others like this, even if they were family. When the lawsuit was officially filed, the fallout was immediate. My parents were furious, of course, but their anger was eclipsed by their disbelief. They genuinely seemed to think I wouldn't have the nerve to go through with it. My father called me the day after the filing, his voice cold and clipped. "You're making a mistake, Jackson," he said. "You're going to regret this." "I think the only mistake I've made is letting this go on for as long as it has," I replied, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "This isn't about revenge, Dad. It's about justice." Elizabeth, predictably, was livid. She sent me a series of scathing text messages, accusing me of tearing the family apart and betraying her. "You're nothing but a selfish, ungrateful brat," one message read. "Mom and Dad gave you everything, and this is how you repay them." I didn't bother responding. I knew anything I said would only fuel her rage. The court proceedings began a few months later, and true to Lauren's prediction, it was messy. My parents' lawyer, a smarmy man named Victor Crane, tried to paint me as a greedy, ungrateful son who was lashing out because of jealousy. He brought up every instance where my parents had helped me financially, twisting the narrative to make it seem like I was the one taking advantage of them. But Lauren was ready for him. She methodically dismantled his arguments, presenting evidence of the blatant favoritism and manipulation that had defined my upbringing. She called witnesses who testified about the disparity in how my parents treated me versus Elizabeth, and she presented the damning financial records that showed the hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into Elizabeth's secret account. The most shocking moment came when Lauren called Elizabeth to the stand. She was visibly annoyed, her usual confidence faltering under the weight of the cross-examination. Lauren didn't hold back, pressing her on the specifics of the bank account and the reasons behind the massive transfers from my parents. At first, Elizabeth tried to deflect, claiming the money was for necessary expenses and that my parents had offered it willingly. But when Lauren presented an email exchange between Elizabeth and my mother, in which Elizabeth explicitly demanded more money to cover her lifestyle, her facade cracked. "This is ridiculous," Elizabeth snapped, her voice rising. "I don't see why this is even relevant. Jackson is just jealous because he's always been second best." The courtroom fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a confession. Lauren let the moment linger before calmly turning to the judge. "I think that speaks for itself, Your Honor." The trial lasted several weeks, each day more exhausting than the last. But when the verdict finally came, it was worth every moment of stress and heartache. The judge ruled in my favor, citing clear evidence of financial manipulation and emotional harm. My parents were ordered to pay $1.2 million in compensation, a sum that felt less like a windfall and more like a validation of everything I had endured. The victory was bittersweet. I knew the money wouldn't fix the damage my family had done, and it certainly wouldn't repair our broken relationships. But it was a start. A way to reclaim my life and move forward without the weight of their manipulation holding me back. As Amelia and I left the courthouse that day, hand in hand, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I was free. Free to live my life on my own terms, free to build a future that wasn't defined by the shadows of my past. And for the first time, I truly believed I deserved it. Moving to a new city was Amelia's idea, but as soon as she suggested it, I knew it was exactly what we needed. The court case had drained me emotionally and mentally, and staying in the same city felt like staying in the shadow of everything that had happened. The whispers, the sideways glances from people who knew my family, it was suffocating. Amelia found a place 400 kilometers away, a modest but charming apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't flashy, but it had everything we needed: space to start fresh and enough distance from my family to feel like a new chapter. Packing up our lives and saying goodbye to the city I had lived in for so long was bittersweet, but as we drove out of town that morning, I felt an unfamiliar sense of hope stirring in my chest. The new city was different, quieter, friendlier. Our neighbors introduced themselves on the first day, a retired couple named Greg and Marcia who lived across the hall. Greg was a handyman with a knack for fixing anything, and Marcia baked enough cookies to feed an army. "If you ever need anything, just knock," she said with a warm smile, handing us a plate of still warm chocolate chip cookies. I wasn't used to this kind of welcome. It felt foreign but comforting. Amelia and I threw ourselves into settling in. She started working remotely for her marketing firm, and I found a job managing operations for a local tech startup. It was smaller than what I was used to, but the environment was welcoming, and the lack of corporate drama was a relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The real work, though, began when Amelia suggested we try therapy. "We've been through so much, Jackson," she said one evening as we unpacked boxes in the living room. "I think it could help both of us process everything and maybe help us figure out how to move forward." I hesitated at first. Therapy wasn't something I'd ever considered. It felt too vulnerable, too exposing. But Amelia was patient, and eventually, I agreed to give it a try. That's how we met Dr. Claire Matthews, a calm and empathetic therapist who had a way of making you feel safe, even when you were baring your soul. Our first few sessions were rough. Talking about my family dredged up memories I'd buried for years. The favoritism, the manipulation, the constant feeling of being less than. It all came flooding back, and there were moments when I wanted to walk out of her office and never look back. But Amelia was there, her presence steady and unwavering, and with time, I started to open up. Dr. Matthews helped me see patterns I hadn't fully understood before. She showed me how my parents' behavior had shaped not only my self-esteem but also my relationships and decision-making. "You've spent so much of your life trying to prove your worth to people who were never going to see it," she said during one session. "It's time to focus on what you want and what makes you happy." Amelia and I also worked on our relationship in therapy. The lawsuit, the family drama, the stress, it had taken a toll on both of us, and I hadn't realized how much until we started unpacking it. But the process brought us closer. For the first time, we weren't just surviving, we were building something real, something strong. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I was always ignored by my parents. As I grew up, my parents pulled me back home and forced me to take responsibility for my brother. When I started packing and left, my parents barely noticed. I was 25 at the time, just out of college, and ready to go it alone. However, I wasn't surprised by it. All my life, I had been the youngest of 5 children. I mean significantly younger when I say youngest. Emily, who is the next oldest, is 7 years older than I am. I'm different from the rest in a lot more ways. As a child, I occasionally felt like I didn't exist. My siblings continued to have affairs. Everything was left to me to handle. You've heard of glass children, youngsters whose siblings demand so much attention that they are ignored or become invisible. I guess I was. My brothers were constantly in and out of treatment programs, therapists' offices, and hospitals for whatever reason. I became the kid who didn't require much since I was okay. I didn't cause problems because I wasn't as ill or having difficulties as others were. So I was overlooked. I don't think that was intentional, but that's how it ended up. I didn't get the best attention. I can't say I had a terrible upbringing. I had everything I could possibly need in terms of food, shelter and clothes. However, I didn't exist emotionally. No one asked how my day went or whether I needed homework assistance. I improved my self-entertainment skills. It turns out that my friend played video games. Books gave people a way to escape. I would immerse myself in imaginary worlds while my brothers were losing themselves in real-life problems. I guess it was a survival strategy, although I didn't know at the time. Since I knew I wasn't creating any issues, I kept under the radar. I was not required to volunteer as a caregiver, in contrast to some others who had ailing family members. All of that was handled by my parents. I guess this was how they protected themselves, but they ignored me in the process. Although I didn't receive much attention, I also wasn't pressured to mature too soon. When all of your efforts are focused on keeping one or more children alive, the person who is not in crisis gets lost. I was that person. It wasn't completely awful. Laura and Sophie, who were basically my saviors, became friends by the time I was 9. We connected over that unspoken knowing, even if their houses weren't very attractive either. All we had to do was understand one another. We didn't need to tell each other why we felt ignored or invisible. We would spend hours at one another's houses to avoid the drama in our own families. Compared to the family I was born into, Laura and Sophie felt more like my own family. By the time we started middle school, we were clinging to each other like lifeboats in a hurricane. It wasn't much different in high school. My relationship with my parents remained distant, but my relationships with Laura and Sophie grew closer. We had ups and downs like any other adolescent, but the three of us remained close. We decided to attend the same university after graduating together. It was almost a given when it came time for college. We would go together, of course. It had nothing to do with academics or the school, but rather with maintaining our small family. After doing so, we remained inseparable for 4 years. After graduation, we decided to move to a different state, away from the chaos we were accustomed to. We set up our life in a tiny apartment. It was wonderful to be out on our own and finally focus on ourselves rather than balancing years of familial burdens. My parents barely heard from me for a while after that. I didn't imagine they would suddenly become interested in my life now because, to be honest, we hadn't talked much even when I was living at home. My mother would occasionally text me, generally with trivial questions like, "How's work?" or "What are you up to?" However, we rarely actually talked about anything. It was better that way, or at least that's how I saw it. I no longer required their attention. Sophie and Laura were enough. For once, I didn't feel like an abandoned child because we all had our own lives and goals. I was rather proud to have started a small family of my own. When my mother called last year, that began to alter. Thanksgiving was a few days away. I knew something was awry when her name appeared on my screen because I hadn't spoken to her on the phone in over a year. The last time Mom called, it was to let me know about my sister's burial arrangements, so phone calls always made me wonder. She immediately got to work asking me what time I was leaving for Thanksgiving at home. I was, to put it mildly, perplexed. First of all, I was unaware that they were even celebrating Thanksgiving because we didn't really observe holidays. We celebrated Christmas and Thanksgiving more times than I can count on one hand when I was a child. It was just not a trait of our family. Given our long-standing tradition, it seemed inappropriate to hear her ask in this manner. I told her I wouldn't be attending. I was planning. Laura, Sophie, and I had been planning a ski trip for months. I couldn't possibly cancel that with only 3 days' notice. Aside from that, I couldn't afford a last-minute plane ticket because I lived 2 states away. My mom didn't get it. She seemed as if I was being deliberately difficult when I tried to explain it to her, guilt-tripping me by saying that she would be alone herself because my dad was spending Thanksgiving with my brother Mike at the facility where he works. It seems that Mom would spend the majority of the day alone while my dad was away. See, I got this. I understood why she wanted company, but she gave me 3 days' notice. She thought I would drop everything. When I told her again that I couldn't make it, she got upset and began to act as if I didn't care about the family. She said I was self-centered. After that, she hung up. For a while, I sat there feeling a peculiar mixture of regret and bitterness. Where had they been for me all those years, even though I felt bad for abandoning her? I was now the bad guy for not dropping everything to go home after not hearing from them for months. I searched through my old books for something I might have missed. However, nothing was present. Thanksgiving is not mentioned. You didn't say you wanted to come see me? I was more perplexed by this last-minute guilt trip than anything else. Later that night, I texted her to let her know that I would also be unable to attend Christmas. We planned to go on another excursion. She never responded when I said that I would love to catch up after the new year. I made an effort to be civil. The fact that a few days passed with no reaction was not shocking. I made an effort to get rid of the weird feeling that had entered my stomach, but it persisted. In hindsight, I think that phone conversation was only the beginning of something much bigger, something I hadn't anticipated. At that time, I had no idea how far this disaster would spread. I thought things would settle down after that odd Thanksgiving discussion, but my dad texted me a week or so later. I never get texts from my dad. He's more of a talk when necessary type of guy, let me tell you. I therefore thought there must be a severe issue when his name appeared on my phone. However, what I read when I opened the message seemed implausible. I genuinely burst out laughing. "If you don't come home for Christmas, I'm cutting off your college payments." What exactly? I received my degree 3 years ago. No more college payments needed to be stopped. I tried to be lighthearted at first, thinking that perhaps he had confused me for one of my siblings or something. 3 years had passed with no payments. Check your bank account maybe? That, I thought, would be the final word. I reasoned that he would realize his mistake, laugh it off, and move on. Nevertheless, my phone buzzed again a few hours later. The message was longer this time around. Yes, my dad was very angry. He went on to talk about my selfishness, how I was abandoning the family, and how I didn't appreciate all the sacrifices my parents had made for me and my siblings. At this moment, I was just staring at my phone in amazement. I had never once made a request of them. To be honest, I was unaware that they believed they were covering my education expenses. All of my costs, including tuition, had been covered by Grandma. To be honest, I was relieved that she wanted my parents to be removed from that area of my life and out of the spotlight. My dad was trying to put me through this whole guilt trip, and it seemed completely unexpected. "I'm sorry you feel that way, but Granny paid for my college. After the holidays, I'm glad to catch up, but I already have Christmas plans," I said after taking a big breath. I assumed that would end it, but it didn't, of course. Instead, he became more focused. He started talking about how the family was supporting me, how I was rejecting them, and how I didn't care about them twice. I was just done if I couldn't even try to spend the holidays at home. It seemed so absurd. When I moved out, people barely noticed that I had been living alone for years. Now, all of a sudden, I was abandoning the family, because I was not returning home for Christmas. The more I considered this, the more angry I got. I tried to brush it off and move on, but I couldn't help but notice how hypocritical it seemed. They hadn't inquired about my well-being, asked if I needed anything, or checked in on me for months. But I was supposed to drop everything and run when they asked for something. If not, it made no difference. I had the impression that I was merely a fallback option for them, someone they could depend on only when it was practical. I called Laura and Sophie to vent my frustration. As usual, they understood immediately. Laura said my parents probably just wanted to exploit me to boost their own self-esteem. She stated plainly, "They don't really care if you're there." Sophie agreed with me. "Screw them. They just want to feel like they've fulfilled their role as parents by getting you home for the holidays. You owe them nothing." That was it. It was just what I needed to hear. I owed them nothing. I made the decision to sleep on it that night before responding to my dad once more. I didn't want to make a mistaken statement. However, my phone buzzed once more as I laid there attempting to let it go. My dad sent me another stern message. "If you don't come home, don't bother coming back at all." I froze as I gazed at the screen. It was like being punched in the stomach. How did we arrive here? From my own father essentially disowning me over Christmas, to hardly speaking to him? I wanted to react angrily, to confront him about all the times I felt invisible in that house and how they had ignored me. However, I decided not to respond. I laid over, put my phone down, and attempted to fall asleep. I had no intention of letting this derail my vacation plans. I received multiple more texts the following morning, this time from my mother. I couldn't help but giggle since they were more of the same, expressions of displeasure and perplexity over why I was being so detached. Separated? They were just now realizing that I had been aloof throughout my life. I ignored the books and focused on preparing for the ski trip. This had taken months of preparation, and Laura, Sophie, and I refused to let my parents bring me down with shame. We drove the following day, and I felt liberated for the first time in a long time. I wasn't feeling guilty about it, not with my parents in mind. I was content to spend time with the people who genuinely loved me. Naturally, though, things can't stay that way forever. My mother sent me another letter in the midst of my trip. Just when I thought I could relax. It had nothing to do with Christmas this time. "If I don't come home soon," she added, "they'll have to start making decisions about my future without me, which I don't enjoy." That's when it struck me. It had nothing to do with Christmas or the holidays, did it? They were planning something bigger, something much more. Maybe it was about my brother Mike, maybe about the house or the family finances. However, I was aware of one thing. They wanted me to be involved in whatever it was. Not because they were missing me. They needed me, for whatever reason. That was their insurance strategy. The realization came as a shock. All this time, I thought they were just trying to guilt-trip me into a homecoming for Christmas. I was never personally concerned about it though. It was all about them. They cared because they wanted to spend time with me. They didn't care if I was present, and I refused to allow them to drag me back into their mess. After that, I stopped reading their messages. I made an effort to be in the moment and not think about what was waiting for me at home as I spent the remainder of the ski trip with Laura and Sophie. We drank too much hot chocolate, joked, and went skiing. It was just what I needed to re-energize. However, the peace would not endure. After the ski trip, I came home and made an effort to reorganize my routine. It felt good to be temporarily removed from all the family conflict, but I knew it would only last. Yes. My oldest brother Nick called me a few days later. It had been months, perhaps longer, since we had spoken. I therefore knew this would not be a casual talk when I saw his name on my phone. Nick was the one brother I ever thought would be sympathetic to me. I always believed that our relationship might have been better because he wasn't as ill as our other brothers. However, he was enmeshed in his own life, just like the rest of our family. When his name appeared, I paused. Curiosity won me over, even if I wanted to ignore it. Nick jumped right in before I could say hello. Mom and Dad have been talking about making you the legal guardian for Michael when they're gone. I sat there in shock for a moment. I felt like I was struck out cold by someone. Was this a prank of some sort? They had barely been in my life for years, and now they were going to force Michael's care on me. Throughout his life, Michael has spent time in and out of care facilities. What on earth? Finally, trying to maintain a calm tone, I asked, "What are you referring to?" My heart was pounding. Nick let out a sigh as if he were annoyed that I wasn't accepting this news with grace. You know the situation with Mom and Dad. They're not going to be around permanently, and they need someone to look after things when they go. I said in a trembling voice. And they consider someone to be me? After everything? After all the ignoring and guilt-tripping, they just believe I'll abandon my life and take up their mess? Nick didn't seem to get why I was offended. Look, you're the only one truly steady among the lot. The others have personal problems. You really have your life together. I almost burst out laughing. All together? What am I living? Yes, I had a solid job, a home, and I wasn't constantly in and out of hospitals, but it didn't mean I was prepared to care for someone, especially after years of treatment that was practically non-existent. Maybe you guys should have considered this before now, I said, growing increasingly irritated. They never bothered me about this. Nick came across as defensive. Like you said, as if everything was already decided behind your back. Until lately, I also knew neither. Still, I considered you should hear it from me before they tried to spring it on you. This has nothing to do with Christmas. Now, the scope of this went beyond a holiday. Michael's parents had big plans for him, and they hadn't even looked to see if I was prepared to take on that kind of responsibility. They just assumed I would. I said, what then? Am I meant to move back home, drop my entire life, and give up all I have worked for to take care of Michael? Nick had no answer for that. I didn't give a damn. I had been ignored my entire life because I wasn't causing trouble, despite his attempts to convey how hard things were for our parents and how they were balancing Michael's care. Problems. Since I wasn't crumbling like the others, I was destined to assume this massive responsibility. There was not enough fairness. I interrupted him in the middle and said, I'm not doing it. I won't be their backup, not here. For a minute, Nick remained quiet. They didn't care about me for the last 25 years, and they don't deserve to make me answerable for anything now. He continued. I get it. I do. Indeed. Still, you are a member of the family. I wanted to yell when I heard the word family. A family? Which family? The family that abandoned me while I was growing up? The family that only gets in touch with me when they need something? I did belong to the family, but only because it was convenient for them. I said, sounding resentful. They turned their backs on me a long time ago. I'm just finally walking away. There was silence on the other end of the telephone. After letting out a sigh, Nick remarked, I'll tell them. After hanging up, I sat there and stared at the wall while attempting to sort everything out. There was a part of me that wanted to shout, throw something, and release all the anger I had accumulated over the years. Nevertheless, I simply felt lethargic and, to be honest, exhausted. I completed their contingency plan. I was expected to step up when things become difficult, but I was done being invisible when it was convenient. I didn't hear from Nick or my parents for a few days. It was as if they were waiting for me to realize my mistake and become the good daughter they had suddenly decided I should be. Even if I changed my mind, I would not move. I got a letter in the mail one afternoon. I wasn't going to let them burden me with their problems because I had my own life. This was from my mother. She had sent a letter instead of calling, Maybe in keeping with our 1800s lifestyle or something. The letter was lengthy and haphazard, and it contained the same guilt-tripping nonsense I had heard my entire life. She went on to talk about how much they relied on me, how hard their lives were, and how they weren't sure what to do if I weren't there. What really got me, though, was the letter's final line. "Emily, we are not asking for much," she wrote. That's when I realized. They weren't begging me to be a part of their everyday life or missing me. This had to do with their wish for someone to clean up their mess when they were gone. When the family was gone, someone was needed to fill in. It was convenience, not connection or love. They wanted to patch things up because I was the only one who wasn't crumbling. I ripped the letter to pieces and tossed it in the trash. When I folded up that letter from my mother, I felt like I had gone as far as I could. I'm finished. I had nothing else to say to them. After years of disregard and usage when it was convenient, they wanted me to take the burden? Of course not. That, I decided, was the end. I blocked their phones after throwing away the letter. It was not the end, of course. A knock on my door occurred a few weeks after I had blocked their numbers. Since it was a weekday, I didn't anticipate anyone. I thought it may be a delivery at first, but my mother was simply standing there when I unlocked the door. She stood on my front porch as if she had a lot of right to be there. I hesitated, unsure if I should slam the door in her face or listen to her. Her appearance had altered. Maybe she was older, maybe she was just more tired. She wasn't the same woman I'd known growing up, for whatever reason. I was unable to determine if it was the years, the stress, or another factor. I didn't feel sorry for her though, not after everything. I tried to speak steadily as I asked, "This is where you are working?" She took a while to respond. She just stood there, looking at me as if she had forgotten who I was. Finally, "We need to talk, Emily," she said. I let out a groan. "No, we truly do not. I have said all I need to say." She took a step forward as if she were going inside, but I remained motionless. I had made the decision to let her in, despite all the deceit and guilt trips. Knowing I wouldn't move, she paused and her voice grew softer. "Your father's condition is growing worse. He visits the hospital, in and out. We have no idea how long he has left, my Emily." I had no idea what to do. "Your father is dying." The card was the one she had been waiting to play. She didn't say anything direct, but I could tell what she was attempting to say. And see, I'm not ruthless. I didn't want my dad to suffer. However, I couldn't just abandon everything and rush to their side like a docile child after everything they had done to me. "I apologize," I responded, attempting to sound composed. "Still, this is not my issue. Years of figuring this out have gone between you and Dad. You cannot simply turn here right now and expect me to make everything right." She gave me the impression that I had struck her. "I'm not calling for your fixing of anything," she replied. "Simply put, I need you there for the family." Once more, that word. Family. I almost burst out laughing. Which family? The one who turned away from me 25 years ago? The one that only speaks with me when they need something? Mom, that family is not what we have. That's manipulation. I thought she was going to argue with me, but she just broke down in tears. My mother began crying on my doorstep, and I was at a loss for what to do. Furthermore, I couldn't just watch her cry. However, I had no intention of inviting her inside. "Look," I replied, lowering my voice despite myself. "I understand this presents challenges for you. I really do. I am not, however, your fallback option. I won't be the one to come and put things under control. You have to face the consequences of your decision." For a minute, I saw anger flicker over her face as she dried her tears and looked up at me. "Emily, we did the best we could. You are not aware of what it was like raising all of you and juggling everything. We were trying to keep everyone else alive. Hence, we ran out of time for you." I had heard the same explanation a million times before. I had a firm voice. I said, "And that's not my fault. You decided to bear 5 children. You decided to drop me behind and concentrate on everyone else. Not mine. That was your choice, and right now, you're attempting to shame me about it. Mom, I am not going to do it." She looked at me for a long time, as if she had forgotten who I was. Maybe she still thought of me as the quiet student who never caused trouble and could be ignored because I didn't require her. However, that child had vanished. They couldn't use me to clean up their mess since I wasn't invisible. "Thus that's it?" she said in a cold tone. "You're just going to ignore us?" she finally questioned. I gave a headshake. "Not yes. Many years ago, you turned away from me. After that she remained silent. I'm just finally walking away." All she did was turn and go back to her car. I watched her leave while feeling a weird mixture of feelings. Of course, I was depressed, but I felt liberated most of the time. It seemed like I had finally let go of something that had been bothering me for years, something I should have let go of a long time ago. I went back inside and took a seat, attempting to organize things. I was no longer angry with her. I wasn't even injured. All I did was carried out. I had life to live, and I refused to allow them to drag me back into their mess despite the humiliation, the manipulation, and the constant feeling of inadequacy. There was silence for the following few weeks. No SMS, no calls, no mail. It seemed like a huge burden had been lifted off my shoulders, and they finally appeared to understand that I would not be coming back. I focused on my life, my career, and my friends. I didn't keep an eye on myself, anticipating the next guilt trip. I was defying established conventions. Their expectations were no longer a burden on me. After about a month, Nick sent me an email. It was only a few sentences long, but it covered everything I needed to know. Last night Dad passed away. I'm not sure how to feel. I thought you ought to be aware. I spent a lot of time looking at the email. It wasn't shocking to me. This was headed my way, I knew. To be honest, I didn't feel depressed or anything else. Actually, I did nothing. I thought about answers for a while. I thought about calling Nick to see how he was doing and maybe even to offer my condolences. But then I realized that this was only another stage in the same cycle, another chance for them to pull me back in. And this time, I hadn't been duped. Without replying, I dismissed the email and continued with my day. I had finally come to terms with leaving their world. I was publicly humiliated by my family at my sister's lavish wedding. Am I the asshole for peeling back the mask of their ideal family? The crystal champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my sister Serafina glide down the altar. The frothy mixture of silk and lace she wore for her wedding was worth more than my annual salary. As soon as I noticed my mother's icy look from the front row, I knew. It was an error of mine to be here. The disappointment to the family, the uninvited sister, who dared to attend Serafina's ideal society wedding. I took a seat further back in the large ballroom. I hoped the gorgeous flower arrangements would shield me from more scathing glances. 2 rows up, a stage whisper echoed, "Can you believe she had the nerve to come?" After what happened at the clinic. I took hold of my husband Liam's hand. It was only his silent encouragement that kept me from fleeing. Our daughter, Maya, 6, fidgeted in her Sunday best, oblivious to the tension that flickered through the air like static before a storm. The wedding march was played by the string quartet. Both are picture perfect. Julian, Serafina's fiancé, was waiting for her at the altar. As he handed her over, the same father who informed me 10 years earlier that I was dead to him grinned, his pleasure beaming across the room. When Mother stood up, the officiant had hardly finished speaking. She glanced at the crowd, her high heels clicking on the marble. "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or permanently hold your peace," she stated. Then she looked directly at me and said, "I apologize, everyone." Years of social manipulation had sharpened her voice, and it echoed loudly in the still room. "But we have an uninvited guest who needs to leave. Ilara, you were explicitly told you were not welcome at family events. This is a private ceremony." 200 faces turned in my direction. Maya pulled away from me. "Mommy, why is Grandma?" Serafina's exquisitely manicured lips curled into an angry smile. "Security, please escort my former sister out. She's trying to ruin my special day, as usual." "Former sister?" Maya's tiny voice broke. "Nonetheless, Aunt Serafina." "I'm not your aunt, dear," Serafina vehemently stated. "Your mother betrayed us all, losing her right to call herself family years ago." Adjacent to our row, 2 security personnel emerged. Liam got up and stood between them and me, saying, "We're leaving? No need for force." Mother's poisonous voice said, "How dare you bring a child into this mess, Ilara? You haven't changed at all, trying to manipulate us with an innocent girl." My cheeks got hot as we went past bewildered guests. Maya trembled in my grasp. Like poison darts, the whispers followed us. Somebody said, "Always was the troubled one. Such a shame what she did to her poor parents. That poor child, having her for a mother." I swung around and halted at the ballroom doors. Serafina stood triumphant at the altar with her mother and father at her sides like proud sentinels. With the exception of the black sheep daughter they killed, it was the perfect family scene. "Congratulations, Serafina," I said loudly over the silence. "I hope the basis of your marriage is more honest than that of your life." For a moment, her smile faltered. "Excellent. I'll tell her what I know." In the lobby, Maya broke down in tears. "Why don't they love us, Mommy? I embraced her while observing Liam's worried gaze across her head. He was aware of what this meant. My years of cautious composure were shattered. My hand was driven by their humiliation of me in front of my daughter. I stroked her hair and said, "Some people, sweetheart, aren't capable of real love," my determination growing stronger with each sob. For 10 years, I've stayed away, swallowing their lies. 10 years of watching Serafina build her perfect life on stolen dreams and buried secrets. But seeing my daughter cry? That's the final straw. They want to talk about betrayal? Fine. Time to show them what real betrayal looks like. I have everything to prove and nothing left to lose. Go for it, my sister. Go for it. The drive home after Serafina's wedding seemed to go on forever. With tears still apparent on her cheeks, Maya had slept out in the back seat. The silence between us stretched like a rubber band on the verge of breaking, and Liam's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Finally, he muttered, "You shouldn't have gone," in a quiet voice so Maya wouldn't wake up. We discussed this. Dozens of social media alerts about the tragedy flashed as I followed the edge of my phone's screen. They made my daughter weep, Liam. Our daughter. And whose fault is that? He replied, his jaw clenched. You knew exactly what would happen. He made a left turn toward us. You wanted it to happen, perhaps because there was truth in it. The charge was more painful than I thought it would be. Pull over, Liam. Pull over right now. He pulled the car into an empty lot. Moving between faded parking lines, I fled in search of air that was not dense and devoid of unsaid words. My sweaty skin felt frigid against the twilight air. Liam left the car running for Maya and followed. Talk to me. What's really going on? I sounded brittle when I laughed. Did you see her face? The way she looked at me? You never wanted to discuss it before. Perfect Serafina told everyone why I was disowned. You know what she told everyone about? The words had a vinegar-like flavor. She told them I stole from the clinic and embezzled money allocated for patient treatment. Anyway, she's working there right next to Father. Probably. Liam was not an expert. I halted. Not right now. His expression was filled with worry as he approached nearer. Likely what? My phone buzzed. A message from an unidentified number. I understand exactly what happened 10 years ago. Meet me at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Coffee on Carson Street. Alara. Liam's hand on my shoulder made me jump. What aren't you letting me know? I sent him the SMS message. His stance grew gloomy. Could be a trap. Your family may not be my family anymore. I turned to face the car again. Someone at the clinic knows something. Someone who was there when everything fell apart. He grabbed my arm and said, "And you're just going to meet this mystery person? After what happened today? Think about Maya. About us." I said, "I am thinking about us." As I stepped back a little. That's why I have to do this. They embarrassed our daughter Liam. Made her doubt everything about who she is. Who I am. Thus, this is about revenge? This is about truth. Through the car window, I saw Maya sleeping peacefully in spite of everything. Serafina built her whole life on lies. The clinic, her marriage to Julian, her reputation. They were all built on top of what she had stolen from me. I recognized the indication from our 10 years of marriage when Liam ran a hand through his hair. He was listening, but he was nervous. Exactly what are you hoping for? I firmly locked his eyes and said, nothing yet, but if someone's finally willing to talk. I need to know if you are really with me, not just standing on the sidelines while I fight this battle alone. He observed me quietly for a while before saying, "You're different tonight. There's something in your eyes I haven't seen before." I moved closer and took his hands, saying, "Maybe because I finally see things clearly. Remember when we first met? You mentioned I was carrying too many ghosts. You were right. But Liam, they were monsters dressed in my family's faces, and I let them haunt me for too long. They were not ghosts. We were swept by the headlights of one car as it passed." Liam's face began to reflect understanding in that little moment. He hugged me tightly. He whispered, "I'm with you." Into my hair. "But we do this cleverly. We do this right. No more improvised confrontations. Agreed?" I breathed in his familiar aroma, gaining strength from his solid presence. "Coming with me tomorrow at the coffee shop? Watch from a distance, make sure it's not a setup." He pulled back and touched my face, saying, "Of course. But, Alara, promise me something. Always. We protect Maya first. Whatever we learn, whatever happens, always." "Always," I said, although I was aware that sometimes defending oneself meant retaliating. Sometimes it entails destroying everything in order to use the ashes to construct something bigger. Maya shifted a little in the car, murmuring in sleep. I felt my will stiffen like titanium as I stared at her. Serafina and my parents thought they could make me look foolish again. Instead, they had provided me with just what I needed, a reason to quit running and start defending myself. My mysterious messenger appeared. I'll begin gathering the matches I need to light this whole facade tomorrow. Tomorrow. However, I would be cuddling my child tonight and reflecting on why the truth was more important than any easy lie. I discovered Ms. Chen, our family clinic's former accountant, hunched over a laptop in the corner of Carson Street Coffee, which was bustling with afternoon traffic. Liam caught my eye from his position at the counter and acknowledged in silence that he was watching. Opposite Ms. Chen, I sank onto the chair. Her fingers were a little unsteady as she closed her laptop. 10 years is a long time to stay quiet. I wasn't sure you would show up. I spoke in a neutral tone even though my heart was pounding. Where now? Uncomfortably, she looked around and distributed a USB disk. Your sister's wedding. It was all over social media. When I saw what they did to you, you ought to see something here. The drive felt very heavy in my hand. What's on it? Miss Chen softened her voice and leaned forward. Financial records from before you left. Your father actively covered up massive ones. Your father didn't just frame you for embezzlement, Alara. I got my coffee. Ms. Chen stammered at Liam's presence because of his quiet manner of staying close. When he was gone, she went on. She stated, the patient passed away in 2013. Remember? How could I forget? After receiving experimental treatment, a patient with terminal cancer passed away. The inquiry exonerated the clinic. However, what about it? Serafina administered the wrong dosage. She wasn't qualified, hadn't even completed her medical training. The comments spoken by Ms. Chen were like physical blows. Your father buried it, paid off the family. He used the money he claimed you had taken. The coffee cup trembled on the saucer as I set it down. Do you have evidence? Everything's on that drive, including evidence that Serafina never finished medical school. The credentials her clinic uses are all falsified. My throat constricted. Why did you not step forward back then? Her face reddened with shame. Your father threatened my family. My daughter was sick. I needed the insurance. But she's grown now, and I noticed what happened at the wedding. The way they're still hurting you. My phone was buzzing from Serafina. Having coffee with anyone intriguing? I glare and catch a glimpse of Julian's automobile through the window as it drives off. They were watching me. With a hint of terror in her voice, Mrs. Chen knew this. I wouldn't have. I stood up, held out an arm, and said, it's okay. Let my husband drive you home. Liam arrived immediately and walked Mrs. Chen out after reading the situation. Just catching up with old friends. Married life, how is it? Is what I said to Serafina. She answered right away. Keep your distance from Mrs. Chen, there should be some stories buried. I snatched up the USB device and began thinking quickly. However, it was father who sent the following message. Your place of employment, 1 hour, come alone, Mrs. Chen loses everything. Something had altered, but it was obviously dangerous. The trembling in my hands was sudden anticipation instead of fear. I was stopped at the clinic by father's secretary, but I pushed by her and went into his office, where Serafina and he waited. Serafina said, that was quick, but her usual haughtiness disappeared. I approached father across his desk and said, enough games. You want to threaten Mrs. Chen? Go ahead. First, explain something. How many other patients did Serafina kill? He lost the color in his face. Serafina took a step. You're talking about something else entirely. I took note of their answers. 2013. Terminal cancer patient. Wrong dosage. Ring any bells? You've obviously lost your mind, remarked father. However, I interrupted him. Funny thing about buried secrets, someone always keeps receipts. I grabbed my phone and listened to the recording of Mrs. Chen. Wonder what the medical board would find. For my phone, Serafina pressed forward. Her front fell apart as I sidestepped with ease. You are bluffing. Try me. I turned to face father. You destroyed my life to protect her. Framed me for theft. Erased me from the family. All to cover her mistakes. He spoke in a cold tone. That which was required. Serafina had promise. You were always difficult, complicated. I laughed, and the sound was so harsh that they both flinched. I was the only one speaking the truth. Now I have evidence. What do you want? Asked Serafina. I walked over to the door and put my hand on the handle before hesitating. I smiled this time as I saw decades of pain solidify into meaning. Want? I want you both to know what's coming. Every lie, every cover-up, every patient you've put at risk, it all comes out. This time, I'm not the one that vanishes. I ignored their objections as they followed me out. I had enough facts in my pocket thanks to the USB drive to destroy their perfect world. Allow them to attempt to stop me. The young child I was? No longer scared. They should have been terrified of me. Financial documents, fictitious credentials, and patient records were among the contents that splattered onto my laptop screen from the USB stick. With every item, the evidence against my family grew stronger. As I answered an email thread from mother and father, my hands trembled. I turned the television to reveal Liam pacing our home office. "You need to see this," I murmured. His jaw locked, he leaned forward to glance over the files. To my own ears, my voice sounded distant. They knew about the other patients. 3 more deaths, all covered up, all credited to natural causes or equipment faults. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Julian's expensive car arrive into our driveway. I took Liam's arm as he approached the entrance. "Let me take care of this." The confident man from Serafina's marriage was nothing like Julian. His eyes were darkened by deep wrinkles, and his tie was untied. "We must chat, Alara." With a deliberate lack of offer, I led him to the kitchen. His wedding band was a toy. His eyes swept across my laptop. "Serafina told me what you had," he continued. "Whatever they're presenting to you, who's delivering what?" He ran a hand through his hair and replied, "The medical board investigators. They asked about disparities in Serafina's credentials yesterday." My heart raced, but my eyes remained unfocused. "I haven't contacted any investigators," he said. "Don't lie to me," in a voice that broke. He mumbled, "I know what she did. What they all did. I've been reviewing the clinic's records since the wedding and I can't. I have evidence too. Things even you don't know about. But if this gets out, it won't just destroy Serafina and your parents. Other good people are involved, just following orders." My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "An anonymous complaint regarding probable maltreatment in your house just arrived at your daughter's school. CPS has been notified." Panic rose and the room swayed slightly. Julian saw how I responded. He whispered, "They're desperate. They will do anything to maintain this silence." Like pieces of ice, the words came out of me. "They're threatening my daughter." Julian replied as he leaned forward. "Let me help you. I can get you money, enough to disappear, start fresh somewhere else. Just hand over the evidence." There was Liam in the doorway. His manner stayed the same. Julian remarked, "I guess you should leave," as he stood up. "You don't understand. They'll fabricate evidence against you, Alara. Mark already called in favors with local authorities. They'll take Maya." "Get out," I said in the same tone. "Tell my sister and parents they just made their biggest mistake." After Julian went, I shook, but Liam held me, feeling determined instead of scared. He said, "We have to move quickly." "Should they be involving Maya?" "No." I turned aside as my ideas began to solidify into a new plan. "We're running. Call your sister at the newspaper. It's time everyone knew exactly who the Millers really are." My fingers raced across the screen, arriving at encrypted files that I had spent weeks gathering. "Alara, they killed Mrs. Chen? They'll destroy us if we run," Liam replied. "But they neglected something vital about cornered animals." "What's that?" I turned the screen in his direction and showed him the audio recordings, surveillance photos, and backup data from the parallel study I had been conducting with Mrs. Chen. Those fight hardest when they have nothing left to lose. I started sending emails to all of the major national news outlets. "Mother wants to play games with her granddaughter's safety? Fine, let's see how she likes it when the whole world knows exactly what kind of monster she really is." According to Liam, this could backfire spectacularly. "Probably," I said as I sent the emails and saw them disappear into the internet. "But I'm done playing according to their rules." The first national news alert appeared on my phone a few minutes later. The dispute was recognized, and this time, my goal was to completely destroy them rather than just disclose the facts. The police arrived at 3 in the morning. I started from the window of our bedroom as they took Liam away in handcuffs, their accusations of embezzlement, conspiracy, and fraud echoing through the quiet street. All made up, all carefully planned to ruin him. Thankfully, Maya slept through it. I watched her quiet breathing from her doorway, knowing that I was the cause of this. Later, a call from father's number buzzed through my phone. His voice carried decades of trained dominance as he asked, "Are you satisfied? This is just the beginning, Alara. Walk away now or tomorrow it's her school calling with concerns about her home life." Quietly, I ended the call. I packed Maya's favorite stuffed animal, clothes, and her favorite photo album in her overnight bag. I had trembling hands. Liam's sister Claire arrived precisely 1 hour later, looking scared and bewildered. "It's just for a few days. Like a holiday with Aunt Claire," I said to Maya as she woke up. "But what about Daddy? What about you?" I hugged her and breathed in her comforting aroma. "We'll fix everything, I promise." After they left, the house appeared to be a tomb. I poured myself a glass, but before I could take a swallow, the front door was pounded. Serafina stood on my doorstep, her face smudged with mascara. "They are going to kill you." "What?" She pushed by me while hastily examining doors and windows. "I overheard them speaking. Father hired someone. They're making it look like a break-in gone bad." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Mrs. Chen was my friend too," her voice cracked. "And I cannot have another death on my conscience." For the first time in years, I genuinely looked at my sister. The perfect facade had fallen apart, revealing a person who was equally damaged as I was. "Additionally, Julian left me," she added. She took hold of my arm. "The medical board revoked my license. Everything's falling apart, and they're just worried about protecting themselves like they always have. They're just worried about it. You have to run. Right now. Take what you can." The windows were brushed by headlights. Serafina stopped. "They're here," I told her to get out the back, as I was already making my way to my laptop. 2 minutes is all I need. "Alara, go." I instantly uploaded everything to several secure servers. The front door shattered beneath the weight of powerful boots as she vanished. 2 males came in with their faces turned away. Expert. Clinical. I knew the expression, the same cold efficiency father always praised in his business dealings. "This can be easy or difficult, Mrs. Collins," the taller guy replied kindly. As they came closer, I looked aside and bought seconds. "My father sends his greetings. The Millers send their sympathies over your terrible accident." A clicking sound caused them to turn. Serafina held her phone while she stood there. She declared, "I livestream everything?" The men looked at each other. At that moment, I sprang toward the front door, but the shorter one grabbed me. My face erupted in pain as he hit me. I observed Serafina walk toward the man through blurry vision. "Run," she cried out loud. I staggered onto the street with blood in my mouth. My ears are ringing. Behind me, glass broke. I couldn't tell if it belonged to her or to me. She let out another scream. The lights flashed on in the dwellings of the neighbors. An automobile engine roared to life somewhere. Professional to the last, the men left my residence and made their way gently to their car. Serafina was asleep in the kitchen, her phone crushed close by. But she was breathing, and when sirens screamed in the distance, she started to stir. With a whisper. "Did you get it?" she said. "The evidence?" "Yes." As she sat up, I pointed out the bruises that were already starting to form. I questioned. "Why did you come back?" She caressed her injured lip lightly and said, "Because I remember. Before they turned us against each other, I remember when you were my big sister. And I miss that person." The sirens approached. Soon there would be questions, remarks, and more lies from parents. Liam remained in prison. Maya had left. Everything I had constructed was in ruins all around me. However, what older sister Serafina said struck a chord with me. I felt something, not forgiveness yet, not at all. Nevertheless, it touched something deep to know that we had both been manipulated by our parents and turned against one another for their own purposes. I said, "We have to end this." As my kitchen walls were illuminated with red and blue lights. Not just expose them, destroy them. Totally. As Serafina gazed at me, I saw my sister instead of my enemy for the first time in decades. I took hold of her hand and we both felt the weight of our own wounds and our shared tragedies. We were like that, bloodied but unbowed, when the police showed in the following day. Finally, together against the real demons in our story. Assume our parents would prevail. Their darkest horror was going to turn into their ideal family fantasy. The Miller Family Clinic's annual charity banquet served as our battleground. Serafina and I watched our parents work the room separately, acting as though nothing was wrong and that they hadn't attempted to have me killed the previous week. Mrs. Collins, one of the board members, touched my arm. "Surprised to see you here, given the circumstances." Using Mother's perfect social mask, I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. Father reached for the podium across the room. "Welcome everyone. Tonight, we honor 30 years of serving our community." Serafina indicated that everything was prepared from near the AV stand. I reached for my phone. Liam's attorney had confirmed that father's accounts offered concrete evidence of financial malfeasance and that the charges against him had been dropped. "I'd like to share a video highlighting our clinic's achievements," father added. Instead of the planned presentation, security footage took the stage as the lighting grew darker. Father, counting money at his job. Mother, threatening to alter patient records with Mrs. Chen. Each clip was completely damning, dated, and recorded. Shock rippled through the room as the audience gasped. Even though father fumbled with the microphone, his voice was overpowered by the sound of him giving the command to beat me. Mother screamed, "Turn it off!" But Serafina held the door of the AV booth closed. I moved forward, my words echoing over the stunned silence. 30 years of fraud, corruption, and murder. Is this what we're celebrating? "Security!" shouted father, but the hired officers remained still. They were working for me tonight. I took a step toward the podium. "Just like the private investigators watching you, the forensic accountants tracking your bribes, and the lawyers building cases for every family you've destroyed." Mother's cool head broke as she lunged at me. "You unappreciative," Serafina replied. "Careful, mother," as she appeared from the throng. "The press is recording this right now." As invited anonymous reporters recorded every remark and every scene, cameras did indeed flash. Father's face twisted in rage as he asked, You planned this together? My own daughters?" "Your daughters," I said, my laughter piercing like shattered glass. "Everything I did was to protect this family," he growled. "You tried to kill me. Last week, you framed my husband, you threatened my child." With brutally digging fingers, he seized my arm. "Let her go," said Serafina in a firm, steely voice. "Or I tell them about Jason." Dad froze. The mother said, "What?" "The patient from 2011, Serafina replied, purposefully staring at him. "Except it wasn't the equipment, was it? It was you, trying to cover up a mistake that would have cost you everything. You blamed equipment failure." "You knew?" Mother said in a shaky voice. Serafina answered. "I found the actual records." With a little tremble in her voice. "You never protected me because you loved me. You did it because you needed someone under your control. The ones you kept to blackmail the manufacturer realized that too." This time, actual policemen entered the ballroom. Father shoved me away as he saw them and ran for the door. Julian, my surprise ally, tripped him before he had taken 3 steps. The chamber reverberated with the sound of shackles snapping into place as father lay splayed on the marble floor. As mother fought her own arrest, shouting a long list of denials and obscenities, the investigator started, "Mark Miller, you are under arrest." He then read him his rights. "You're charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud." I wasn't listening though. I saw as their masks were irreparably broken and their utopia crumbled. My arm slid across Serafina's. "You're free now," she remarked quietly. I continued to yell against unappreciative kids as I watched mother being hauled away. However, I had a strange weight lift, a future emerging in which I was no longer under their control.